Snow drifted in languid spirals through the tumbled gate tower of Castle Black, thin as the last shreds of a memory unwilling to fade. Jon Snow stood alone above the shattered courtyard, listening to the wind moan through frost-slick stones. Each sigh seemed to carry another voice that had once called this place home. Gren laughing at some clumsy jest, Pip cursing the cold, Samwell puffing for breath as he hurried from the library with a candle guttering in his hand. They were ghosts now, all of them, even Sam, though Sam still breathed somewhere south of the neck. The wall had bled them of everything but their echoes. Jon flexed gloved fingers along the scarred parapet. The ice beneath his palm felt older than kingdoms, older than dragons, older than the songs that promised glory to men who would never taste it. Duty is the death of love, Maester Aemon had once told him. Yet here stood Jon Snow, stripped of lover and crown alike, carrying both in secret in the marrow of his bones. A hush settled when Ghost materialized from behind a drift, crimson eyes catching the faint light. The direwolf pressed his muzzle against Jon's thigh, silent as ever, save for the low rumble that lived in his chest. Jon scratched the coarse fur. "We're going south," he whispered, though the wolf knew already. Jon had spent 3 moons weighing the summons folded inside his doublet, the parchment sealed with blazing sun and pierced spear. Dorndentai, a land he had never seen, kept alive in northern hearth tales as a place of burning sands, limber knights and women as fierce as the desert itself. Yet Prince Marin Nameros Martell, newly returned from exile in Norvas, had written in a hand as steady as Winterstone, "The realm you bled to save festers. Come, and we may yet heal it together. Hospitality and safe conduct are yours under my sun and spear. I write in the name of my sister, and in yours, for blood calls to blood, though crowns forget it." Jon had read the letter beneath a guttering torch, the flames turning inked words to wavering shadows across the ice. Blood calls to blood. The prince's words had stirred something long dormant, the thing that breathed in dragon dreams and woke him sweating with the taste of ash on his tongue. When the dawn cracked pale and pink over the wall, Jon saddled an old Garin and left without ceremony, north gray cloak snapping behind him like the tail of some half-remembered beast. Only Dolorous Edith watched him go, tilting his head with funereal solemnity. "If I never see you again," Ed called after him, "I expect I'll miss your brooding as much as the smoke misses the pyre." Jon offered a curt nod, words snagging in the hollow he carried in place of a heart. Then he was through the gate, descending the scarred switchbacks into the world he had once vowed to keep from ending. Southward the land changed from barren frost to rain-soaked field, then to whispering pine, then to heather and stone and the first shy stirrings of spring. On lonely roads Jon wore the guise of an unremarkable ranger, hood drawn low, sword unadorned. Yet the nights betrayed him. Beneath flickering campfires he remembered dragonfire blossoming on the walls of King's Landing, and Daenerys' eyes lit not with madness, but with a hunger carved by loss upon loss. Meereen, Astapor, Karth, all the children she could never save, all the chains she could never break. He had knelt before the charred ruin of the Red Keep, and felt the heat of her blood on his hands long after it cooled. Some nights Ghost would raise his muzzle to the stars and howl, and Jon would wake trembling, sure he smelled salt and smoke on the wind. He would press the signet ring hidden in his pouch, the direwolf and dragon entwined, and wonder how a single thin band of gold could weigh more than a crown. By the time he crossed the Green Fork at Old Stones, rumor had already outraced him. Small folk chattered of a sellsword host gathering along the Dornish marches, of Prince Marin proclaiming Dornish independence, unless the Iron Throne ceased seizing grain caravans bound for Sunspear. Queen Sansa Stark, Jon's own sister, though the realms knew not, had dispatched diplomacy. But King Aegon VII in King's Landing tightened his grip on the Arbor and the Reach alike, leaving Dorne to parch. Aegon.g. Young Griff no more, but a dragon seated upon the iron monstrosity, the city whispering that his claim flowed pure from Rhaegar Targaryen through Elia Martell. Yet the boy king nursed every slight like wildfire cupped in his palm, eager to scorch whatever dared to quench it. Jon rode in silence, remembering the bright hopeful lad aboard the Shy Maid. the eager tilt of his chin as he spoke of justice and gentle rule. War sharpened some men, warped others. The Iron Throne devoured them all. Another fortnight carried Jon into the Riverlands, where spongy spring earth swallowed hoofprints and carrion crows followed in lazy arcs above the hedgerows. At Maidenpool he paused long enough to trade his Garen for a sand-colored courser, better suited for southern sun. He scrubbed the black from Longclaw's direwolf pommel with ash water, till the silver shone anew. Then he turned his face to Dorne. The Prince's Pass rose before him like a scar through the red mountains, jagged peaks clawing low clouds until they bled pink dusk. Wind roared along the narrow defile, smelling of heated stone and something faintly sweet. Sage, rosemary, strange perfumes to a man forged beyond the wall. At the pass's gate Jon found a cadre of spearmen arrayed beneath orange and gold banners. Their commander bore no helm. Her wine-dark hair coiled in braids about a circlet of copper chain. She regarded Jon with the stillness of a polished blade. "You travel far, Snow Wolf," she said. "Most men seeking Sunspear come by ship round the Broken Arm. I was summoned. Show me the summoner's promise." Jon produced Prince Meryn's sealed letter. The woman broke the wax, read swiftly, then offered the parchment back with a sharp nod. "I am Lady Nymella Corgyle, sworn lance to House Martell. You will ride with me to Sandstone. From there, outriders will carry us to Sunspear. Desert knights do not forgive stragglers. I keep my own pace." She assessed the broad shoulders under his worn wool, the bastard sword slung across his spine, the silent white shadow at his stirrup. "You'll find the desert swift to remind you whose pace matters." Ghost bared fangs in perfect stillness. Lady Nymella's brows rose, but she only whistled, and the gate creaked open on rust-red hinges. Sunset bled molten gold across the sand sea as their column wound between mesas that glowed like hearth coals. Heat pressed close, thick as sailcloth. Jon's cloak felt suddenly absurd. Sweat salted his lips. Yet he said nothing, matching Lady Nymella stride for stride. At camp she watched as he shed armor to care for the courser, murmuring to the horse in northern cadence. When he rinsed Ghost's paws in a skin of precious water, she spoke. "The pass is not gentle. Those claws burn." "So does ice," Jon answered. She laughed, low and musical. Perhaps Prince Meryn knew what he summoned. That night, his first beneath a sky unchained by wall of ice, Jon lay wrapped in linen under an expanse of stars bright enough to shame dawn. Ghost rested beside him, flank rising and falling, with the hush of distant surf. Jon tasted flint on the air, and in that flint something new. The faint iron scent of forging, as though the desert itself hammered fate upon some hidden anvil. In dreams Daenerys stood atop a dune, silver-gold hair whipped by scalding wind, her gaze not accusing but yearning. A living sun blazed behind her, and when she opened her hands ashes spilled like black snow. "You are my fire now," she whispered, and her words became the crack of dragon wings overhead. Jon reached for her, yet the dune collapsed to glass beneath his boots, and he awoke with the tang of smoke in his throat, though the campfires had burned to embers. Sandstone's walls curved like the petals of a vast rose, built from ridged blocks, the color of sunglow. Within, cool pools mirrored arches, painted with scenes of Nymeria's fleet and the Dane of the Sword of the Morning. Courtyards overflowed with citrus trees, their blossoms thick as snowflakes. Jon traced the air with his fingers, lost between scents, orange and lemon mingling with oil-polished steel. Prince Meryn received him in a vaulted gallery open to the sky. He was slighter than Jon expected, his shoulders narrow in a robe of copper silk, yet his eyes burned with the hot calm of desert noon. Arianne Martell stood beside him, her beauty tempered by the hard lines drawn by a decade of disappointments. Jon remembered her only vaguely from dragonlit nights outside Meereen's walls, but her gaze said she remembered him well. The prince knelt before Jon. "We are a house that pays its debts." He lifted a small box of gilt bone. Within rested a ring wrought in the shape of twin dragons chasing one another's tails, set with a solitary ruby. "Elias Remembrance," he said softly. "Forged in secret when Rhaegar spoke to her of songs to come. Lost these many years, found again in the ruins of the water gardens. It is yours. Jon froze. The ruby winked like a living coal, and with it came a rush of warmth through his veins. Echo of a fire he had smothered in blood and snow. He closed the box. I am no prince. You are what your blood declares, Arianne murmured. And the realm has need of that blood. I am sworn to no throne. Then swear to no throne, Meryn said. Swear instead to a pact. Night wrapped sandstone in violet velvet as the prince led Jon through colonnades toward a secluded garden. Lanterns glowed amber amid pomegranate branches. A table waited in the heart of the trees, set for 3. Wine steamed with spices, plates bore figs and roasted quail. Jon tensed at such ceremony, but Meryn gestured him to sit. When the Dragon Queen fell, the prince began. Dorne lost more than an ally. We lost our last chance at justice for Aelia, for her children, for 10,000 shards of broken vows. Young Aegon sits the throne. Yet he answers for his mother's murder as much as Tywin Lannister did. The Iron Throne is a wheel grinding our bones to dust. We will not bleed beneath it again. Yes. Jon tasted sweet cinnamon on the wine, fire beneath honey. I have no wish to claim any throne. Nor do we wish to place another upon it, Arianne said. We wish to replace it with something older than the crown forged by dragons bent on conquest. Meryn leaned forward until candlelight painted his features in shifting amber. Nymeria of the Rhoynar once wed Mors Martell and forged a realm from desert sands. You carry the blood of the dragon, but born of stark ice, 2 ancient rivers meeting in one man. Bind that blood to Dorne, not with iron, but with marriage, and together we might build a realm where swords are sheathed beneath the sand, and the small folk are not kindling for a tyrant's fury. Jon stiffened. Marriage. I didn't I knew. Arianne's smile was faint, like starlight glimpsed through gauze. I am no maiden flowering in her father's orchard. I am 34, widowed twice by war. I have lovers but no illusions. I have a mind shaped for statecraft, a womb that might still quicken, and a people who trust my voice. Marry me, and Dorne will bear your secret. In time, we reveal your true name, not as conqueror, but as bridge. Let Aegon rule. What remains of the Reach? Jon set the cup down. His heart hammered. You ask me to trade one throne for another. We ask you to forego the throne, Meryn answered. Sit under no crown. Let us make a treaty sealed in flesh and blood. We will send emissaries to Winterfell and Storm's End, to Bravos and Oldtown, pledging grain and silk in equal measure. A continent weary of dragons and lions alike will flock to a standard that promises peace. Call it the Pact of Sunspear. Ghost padded from the shadows to sit at Jon's heel. The wolf's gaze flicked between the prince and his sister, unblinking. Jon felt those red eyes on his own skin. Duty is the death of love. He remembered driving a knife into Daenerys' heart because he believed duty demanded it. What, then, was duty now? To the wall he had pledged, but the wall lay silent. To Winterfell he belonged, but the North had crowned another. He thought of the ring Prince Meryn had offered, of ashes in Daenerys' hands, of a wheel turned to powder beneath dragonfire. He thought of Arianne's voice, low, steady, promising not victory, but equilibrium. At last he spoke, words rough as desert grit. No pact rooted in deception holds for long. I would not hide my name behind silk veils. Arianne met him with clear, fearless eyes. Then let us swear to reveal it when the realm is ready, no sooner. We do not conceal truth forever. We shepherd it until the land can bear its weight. Jon looked to Ghost, whose ears flicked toward the distant hush of waves beyond Sandstone's walls. He felt something shift within him, the slow, tectonic grind of a glacier meeting lava. I will ride to Sunspear, he said, and I will hear every word of this pact, but no vows tonight. Prince Meryn inclined his head. The desert teaches patience. Arianne's hand brushed Jon's, so brief he might have imagined it. leaving a heat that lingered long after the night breeze cooled the lanterns. Words seeped ahead of them like groundwater through cracked earth. The White Wolf of the North rides with Dorne's prince. The dragon's ghost walks under a sun-striped banner. When they reached Sunspear, crowds lined the stone streets. Brown faces upturned beneath awnings of gauzy cloth. Children scattering blue petals. Jon kept his hood pulled low, but Ghost's presence carved rumors deeper than any herald's shout. Sunspear itself rose like a spear tip, its 3 spires catching dawnlight. Beyond the Shadow City sprawled the Shadow City proper, a hive of bazaars where pepper and saffron perfumed the air. Jon crossed clamoring colonnades, where hawkers sold carved dragonbone flutes and moonstone rings said to hold fragments of summer lightning. He kept to the prince's side, but his mind drifted north, past the neck to the haunted forest, to a woman in gray riding toward Whitetree to inspect new weirwood shoots. Arya, does your wolf still race beneath the moonlight? Inside the old palace, vaulted halls held mosaics depicting Rhaenys riding her dragon, Meraxes above suns and spears. One panel, newer, the tiles less worn, showed a silver-haired woman atop a black dragon, arms outstretched over a broken wheel. Jon stared until his muscles locked, breath thinned. Someone had carved Daenerys' likeness with soft eyes, mouth curved in wonder rather than wrath. You see her, Arianne's voice murmured beside him. We remember. Jon swallowed. A single breath tasted of cinnamon and tears. That night, the Pact of Sunspear was laid upon a marble table in a chamber whose high windows breathed sea air. Scrolls enumerated grain shipments, water rights, mutual defense, liberation of the stepstones for free passage. Yet amidst quills and seals lay 2 rings. Elias twin dragons, and a simple band of lapis, the shade of dusk over the summer sea. I would have you wear one, Arianne said, and I the other, until the pact is sealed or broken. Jon lifted the dragon ring. The ruby caught torchlight, casting thin red arcs across the parchment map of Westeros. Blood calls to blood. He slid the ring over his finger. Lapis glimmered against Arianne's dusky skin like midnight beside sunset. No vow spoken, yet something older than words passed between them in the hush of that chamber. Dornish nights bloomed with stars so bright, Jon wondered if the sky itself was cracked, spilling the fires of the gods. He walked the palace ramparts alone, Ghost loping in silent counterpoint, letting the cool salt wind scour thought from his mind. Below, the sea slapped whispering against pilings. Above, sails creaked on the Tower of the Sun, ready to unfurl when dawn summoned them. He thought of pipes of bone, of wheels broken, of dragon wings shuddering to stillness in a hushed throne room. He had chosen death over blind devotion once. Could he choose life, true life, over exile now? Could he let himself believe a realm might breathe without the Iron Throne's crushing weight? Footsteps padded behind him. Arianne swept her cloak about herself, the silk catching starlight. She stopped at the parapet, watching breakers smash luminous against rock. In the water gardens we learned as children, that still water reflects truest, she said. Stir it and shapes blur. Jon nodded. In the north we learned to read water by its ice. The wheel you shattered. Did you think what shape would rise from the fragments? I thought only of ending the killing. Arianne's lashes rested briefly against her cheeks. And did you? Jon could not answer. Silence yawned between them, wide as the desert waste. Then she reached for him. Fingers brushed his sleeve, tentative as dawn. He did not draw away, though his breath quickened in his chest. Do you believe blood damns us? She asked. I have carried blood like a brand, he said. It marks, and men follow the mark. Then paint a new mark. Her hand found his. Together, the wind shifted, warm and briny. Far below, Ghost lay with forepaws draped over the parapet edge, gazing at the waves with unconcerned eyes, trusting. Jon laced his fingers through Arianne's. He felt the ring's ruby press between their palms, a small burning sun. When the realm is ready. When we are ready, she corrected gently. He inclined his head. The moon slid from a cloud bank, silvering the desert beyond the distant walls. A realm slept below them, restless, aching for new dreams. Jon Snow, once Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, once son of Ned Stark, once lover of the Dragon Queen, breathed deep and listened, not to ghosts nor to duty, but to the slow pulse of two hearts beating side by side above a sea that had swallowed countless crowns. Dawn broke with gull cries and clashing steel as palace guards drilled in the shadow of the Tower of the Sun. Jon joined them, spinning Longclaw in lazy arcs, testing old rhythms against new hunger. Sweat darkened his undershirt. Desert air stole breath yet gifted sharpened reflex. When the captain called halt, Jon remained, hacking at straw posts until the dire wolf pommel glittered sticky crimson with split reeds. He dismissed the bodies of straw and lifted his gaze. Across the training yard, Meryn watched, arms folded. His expression was neither admiration nor concern. Something stranger. A measured curiosity. "One man with a Valyrian blade cannot win the realm," the prince said as Jon approached. "Nor can one army without a soul." Meryn's mouth curved. "Souls can be bought if you offer enough hope." He gestured to archways where scribes hurried with sheaves of parchment. "Word spreads already. Reach small folk desert their fields to flee Queensguard levies. The Stormlands starve under tariffs. Hearts and bellies both yearn for a gentler banner." Jon sheathed Longclaw. "Hearts are fickle, bellies emptier still. Fortunately, Dorne is a land of orchards beyond counting." A shout from the gate cut short reply. A rider, dusty and swaying, burst into the yard, sliding from the saddle with a groan. He thrust a satchel into the captain's hands before collapsing. Blood stained his tunic where an arrow's fletching protruded. The scroll he carried bore the seal of Storm's End. Meryn cracked the wax. His brows knit. "Lord Gendry Baratheon appeals for aid," he murmured. "Aegon's ships blockade Shipbreaker Bay. Grain stores burn. Lord Gendry's small folk riot." Jon felt a thrumming at the base of his skull, like a war drum muffled by distance. "Gendry, Arya's friend, the blacksmith made lord." A summons wrapped in smoke. Meryn's eyes lifted to meet Jon's. "Storm's End holds the key to the narrow sea. Aid them, and our pact gains steel and win. Ride openly, and the king brands you traitor." "Ride openly," Arianne corrected, appearing beside them in a ripple of coral silk. "And we claim the word defender while he is left with oppressor." Jon glanced between them. Silk and steel, flame and sun. A ship would be faster. Sail past the stepstones under Dornish colors. Meryn nodded. "The sun spears gray sleeves on the next tide. Will you stand upon her prow?" Ghost nosed Jon's hand, as if to urge decision. Jon met the wolf's burning eyes and understood. Some pacts are written in ink, others in the salt sting of sea spray. "I will stand," he said. "And when I reach Storm's End, I will hold my blade for those who cannot raise one." Arianne's smile blazed, bright as sunrise over the dunes. Then the pact breathes. The sun spear's grace cut through green waves like a bronze arrow, fletched with desert wind. Dolphins paced her hull. Gulls wheeled overhead, shrieking delight in the brisk spray. Jon stood at the forecastle, cloak snapping, Ghost poised beside him with fur plastered by salt. Ahead, cloud banks stacked like pale fortresses, lightning flickered, distant yet racing on iron feet. Below deck, Dornish sailors whispered of krakens and red priests who could shape storms. Jon let the rumors wash over him, focusing instead on the rhythm of the ship: creak, snap, boom of sail, slap of wave, hiss of spray. Each note stitched him to the living moment, binding thought to bone. At dusk he joined Arianne on the quarterdeck. She wore simple linen, hair braided against the wind. No jewels, no coronet, only the lapis ring glinting deep blue. She rested both palms on the rail, nails manicured yet chipped by parchment edges. "The storms of Shipbreaker Bay are as stubborn as Dornish pride," she observed. "I have faced worse." She eyed him sidelong. "Have you?" Jon's memory conjured storms of ice and raven shrieks, white walkers gliding silent across moonlit snows. "Aye." She studied him, perhaps measuring frost against sand. "You carry much of the north. Yet your eyes, there is heat there, banked but fierce." "I carry many things. Lay some of them down. Tonight." So. That night, in a cabin, lit only by a single swaying lantern, the pact took flesh. No words carved the darkness, only the hush of linen sliding from skin, the tremor of breath shared mouth to mouth, the mingling of scents, desert sun and direwolf musk, salt and citrus. Jon traced the curve of Arianna's hip, as though mapping a continent he might defend with his life. She pressed her palm to the scar above his heart, and in the hollow of silence that followed, he found not judgment, but a quiet invitation to begin anew. When dawn rose, pale gold upon rumpled sheets, Arianne slept with lashes soft against her cheeks. Jon sat watching the slow rise and fall of her breast, feeling the ship crest waves as steady as breathing. Outside, gulls cried. Ghost dozed curled in the doorway, guardian at ease. Jon slipped from the berth, buckled breeches, and stepped onto the deck. Wind whipped his hair. The coast of the Stormlands lay ahead, iron-gray cliffs fracturing the horizon. Lightning cracked beyond, but in its flash he glimpsed the broad towers of Storm's End, stubborn above the churning surf. He lifted the dragon ring, turning the ruby to catch newborn sun. Blood calls to blood. But blood can mend as well as burn. Behind him, Arianne emerged wrapped in a cloak of dyed silk, hair loose, face unreadable. She moved beside him, tucking wind-tossed strands behind her ear. "Today we pledge aid," she said. "Tomorrow we pledge ourselves." Jon met her gaze, steady as the keel slicing water. Below, ghosts pressed against his boots, and the ship's prow pierced a wave that exploded in silvered foam. "To tomorrow," he whispered. And the wind carried the promise toward Storm's End, across a realm teetering between hunger and hope, toward a sunrise blaze that might yet forge peace from the alloy of ice and fire. "Yeah, no idea." Indeed. The prow kissed the green-black swell with the certainty of a dagger pressed to a soldier's throat. Every plank shuddered, and rigging thrummed like 100 muted lutes. But the Sunspear's grace held her line against the cross-current that snarled before Shipbreaker Bay. Spray burst over the forecastle in veils that tasted of copper, and the deck pitched so violently a lesser wolf might have skidded to the rail. Ghost merely spread his stance and rode the motion, crimson gaze fixed on the storm wall rearing over the horizon. Jon breathed the sea's bitterness until salt prickled his lungs. Lightning flickered behind ragged cloud banks, illuminating Storm's End. No jeweled rookery of turrets, but a squat, unyielding colossus squatting atop its basalt promontory. From afar, its drum tower looked like the clenched fist of a titan straining against shackles of cloud. Braziers spat orange from the battlements, and between each flare the castle appeared a ruin, a silhouette of defiance carved out of night itself. Arianne joined him, cloak snapping like a wounded standard. Her fingers brushed the rail, quick, assessing, as if she could divine the wind's intention through the grain of the wood. Jon watched her profile, the proud slope of her nose, the calm poise at the corner of her lips. Stormlight winked on the lapis ring. In the hush between crash and surge, he heard the slow cadence of her breathing, matched unconsciously to the rise and fall of the ship. "Gendry will waste no beacon fire," she said. "If he has sent for aid, the trouble is worse than rumor dares whisper. He will hold until his people cannot," Jon answered. "In Dorne we say a leader may endure hunger, but a hungry people devour their leader." She turned, gaze sweeping the armed figures massed along the weather deck. 40 spears, 30 bowmen, and a knot of picked sand knights bearing round shields painted with red suns and tapering spears. "I would that we brought 3 more hulls and 1,000 water kegs." Jon's palm found Ghost's nape. "One ship delivers more than none." Sails bellied as the wind shifted to lee, forcing the Grace to tack. Storm's End loomed sharper with each breath. Now they could see the mottled scars where rain had gnawed stone for generations, and the thin slits of murder holes lit from within by restless torchlight. Farther seaward, however, shapes lurked upon the heaving midnight water, faint as smears of ink. The King's blockading squadron. Lanterns swung at their yards. Sullen yellow eyes that winked, vanished, then reappeared as hulls rolled on dark waves. Captain Feliz Orain strode aft, oilskins snapping. 7 galleys, 4 cogs. King's colors on every mainmast. They'll sweep wide to herd us onto the rocks. Her tone carried the dry assurance of someone who had watched storms and men's schemes alike split upon Dorne's reefs. Jon nodded. Hold our course for the main channel until they commit to the pincer. Then featherport. Pretend panic. He traced in the air an arc hugging the surf-clad shoals south of the bar. Their draft's too deep for the gray shoal. We cut inside, run the Lordsport run, then breach the mole under Storm's End's scorpions. Nenewani. Depton whistled through her teeth. A Northman who knows our coasts. I learned a map, penned by Davos Seaworth. Learned it well. Steel-shod feet pounded as sailors surged to their stations. Jon felt the pulse of the deck underfoot, like a giant heart answering his command. Somewhere behind, Prince Meryn emerged with a spyglass, silent as dawn. His eyes never left the enemy's sails. The king's galleys spread in crescent formation, oars chopping surf to froth. From each prow jutted a plated ram wrought like a dragon's head, Aegon's sigil remade in bronze and iron. Trumpets wailed across the water, thin, imperious. Feliz Orain flicked rain from her lashes. They expect us to yield or turn seaward. We do neither. A beat of stillness, then raw energy rippled across the grace. Sheets rattled free. Sailors hauled canvas, reefing the lateen into a taut wedge. Wind slammed home, burying the rail. Spray sheeted over the starboard bow as the ship leapt toward the gauntlet. Crossbow quarrels hissed from the nearest galley, fell short, and vanished with spiteful plunks. Jon planted his boots wide, long claw unslung and balanced. Ghost prowled the deck, hackles knitting into a ridge of snow. Half a league out, the seafloor reared toward the surface. Gray shoal, treacherous, mapped poorly even by smuggler lords. The Grace entered the channel at full heel, her keel grazing sand so close Jon swore he heard the hiss of grains on oak. Behind, 3 pursuing war galleys slewed in panic, banks of oars biting too late at the turn. One hull clipped a hidden reef, and splintering thunder rolled across the bay. The pursuing ships checked their charge, unwilling to founder where they could not follow. Spray tore breath from Jon's lips, but the storm behind held its oath. Lightning leaned, white and forked, framing Storm's End like a sigil burnt upon cloud. The mole jutted away from the castle rock, tipped by a squat beacon tower. Arrow fire lanced from its parapet, defenders, not foes. Gendry's men signaling harbor clearance. The Grace threaded the gap between 2 half-sunken hulks, intentionally scuttled for barricade, then broke into the relative calm of the inner roadstead. A ragged cheer rose. Jon exhaled, sensing the crew's tension loosen like old rope. Yet the night's work was not complete. Far side of the seawall, the blockading fleet regrouped. In dawn's gray light, they would test these defenses anew. By rope ladder, Jon descended to a stone quay slick with spindrift. Lanterns bobbed, revealing a reception of perhaps 40 armored Stormlanders, round shields painted black and gold with a crowned stag's head. At their fore stood Lord Gendry Baratheon, hammer strapped across broad shoulders, rain beating in rivulets along the short stubble of his scalp. He looked older than their last meeting on the Trident camp. Lines etched around the eyes, scars new and half-healed. Yet those eyes brightened at the sight of Jon, and for an instant, the Lord's rough features cracked into a boyish grin. "Snow," he rumbled. "Or is it Stark I call you now?" Jon clasped his forearm. "Tonight I'm the man who brings bread." Gendry's grip tightened. "And steel, if the gods are merciful." He glanced as Arianne disembarked, guiltless steps, scattering puddles beneath embroidered sandals. Recognition flickered, curiosity, caution, perhaps more. He bowed with Stormlander brevity. "My lady, I am Arianne Nymeros Martell," she said, voice smooth as oiled ashwood. "And I have not come idle." She gestured aft. A tarpaulin whipped away, revealing crates stacked high atop deck, sacks of barley, Kegs stamped with Dornish suns, bundles of cured goat, amphorae of sour red. Gendry's shoulders fell in visible relief. Half the province will eat a fortnight on that. But the warmth faded as quickly. The king's courtmasters will not starve while we fill our bellies, nor will they loosen the grip on the bay. Jon followed his gaze over crashing surf where the enemy lanterns still glowered. We'll see to that. Torches led the party up the zigzag stair carved into the cliff. With every step, wind railed louder, yet Storm's End defied it, anchoring boots and hearts alike. Jon felt the fortress's ancient pulse. Thick stones whispering of Argilac the arrogant, of storm kings and bastard conquerors. The tales said magic forged its walls. Spells to turn Stormwind aside. Crossing the massive oak doors, he felt as though stepping into an echo preserved in time's amber. The great hall smelled of damp wool and smoke. Bannerets warmed themselves at hearths large enough to stable horses. Shadows danced above trestle tables where scant provisions were stretched into meals. Thin barley pottage, onions, slabs of hardtack. When Arianne's train entered bearing baskets of citrus and wheels of spiced goat cheese, soldiers straightened, eyes shining with gratitude. They dared not voice. Jon and Gendry retreated to a map room whose only luxury was privacy. Racks of warhammers, mauls, maces lined one wall. Another bore a faded tapestry depicting Orys Baratheon lifting the stag banner after the Storm King's fall. Gendry cleared scrolls from a table. Candle ends guttered, casting small halos on the dust-coated wood. "I've 60 war galleys bottled at anchorages from Cape Wrath to Eastweld," he began, finger-jabbing the coastline. "Most smaller than the king's hulls, but sailors that know these reefs from birth. Aegon's admiral, Sir Jonon Myrtens, holds 3 scorpions on every deck and has reach longbowmen with him. Can skewer a swallow at 200 paces. None?" Jon folded arms. "Your galleys can outrun him but not outshoot. Isles north of Shipbreaker? Skagos rocks patchwork the shallows, good hiding water, poor fighting water. Myrtens won't chase small quarries there. He camps the main roadstead, strangles our harbor, drains our larders." Gendry sighed, the sound more forge bellows than breath. "I can't slip convoys past at night. He strings firepots on lines between hulls. The smoke gives away any keel brave enough to nose through. Minister me, sir." Arianne studied the map where the king's fleet sat astride the bay's mouth. "If we cannot outrun nor outshoot, we must outthink." Jon's gaze drifted to a stack of small carved blocks by the map's edge. Siege game tokens, perhaps. He picked up one shaped like a lighthouse tower. Storm's End once used fire rafts against Dorne, did it not? Wood barges coated in pitch, sent drifting on a favorable wind? Old trick of Argilac, Gendry confirmed. Tar pitch scarce, yet there's pine forest enough inland. Jon replaced the tower. "We don't need pitch, only the fear of pitch." He knelt, rolled the canvas aside, exposing more of the coastline. "Tomorrow at dusk a phantom convoy sails from the north head. Dead hulls, stripped masts. We coat canvas in dung and tree sap. Smokes like a pyre but want flame hot. The admiral sees silhouettes. Smells smoke. Believes we mean to burn his line. He breaks formation to intercept." Arianne's eyes gleamed. While he scrambles, a second column hugs the shoals along the Dornish marches. Supply galleys, small and swift. Under cover of coastal squalls, Jon said. Storm's End's cliffs hide their lanterns until they break onto the inner bay. Your blockade collapses or withdraws out of range. Gendry paced, measuring risk. If Myrtens guesses the ruse, the decoy sailors die for naught. There will be no sailors. Jon tapped the decoy route. Ghost hulls, rudders lashed, sails trimmed. Let the wind be our steersman. Gendry stopped. You plan to send unmanned casks of dung into a high storm tide. And a prayer to the drowned god they drift aright, Jon admitted. Some schemes require faith. Gendry barked laughter abrupt as axe blow. Faith I can lend. He clapped Jon's shoulder, grip heartfelt. You bring more than bread, brother. Brother. Soul. Jon felt warmth deeper than the hearth's glow. He glanced toward Arianne, saw the faint smile she allowed herself when strategies slid into place. Blood may call to blood, but fellowship. Toil, trust, purpose, welded stronger still. They worked until candles guttered in their sockets. Messengers were dispatched. Harbor carpenters, roused from sleep to hollow derelict hulls, pulled onto tide flats. Stable boys commandeered to stuff burlap with sawdust, soaked in pine tar, and pig dung. Blacksmiths scavenged rusted chain to lash rafts. Above, thunder grumbled, a sullen giant haunted by disquiet. At dawn, John climbed the drum tower ramparts where scorpions crouched like crouching manticores poised to strike. Sea wind scoured the sleepless ache from his eyes. Down on the practice yard, Gendry's smiths erected a kiln from brick rubble, bellows already coaxing flame. On scaffolds, Stormlander boys hacked apart empty hogsheads in an uneven percussion. Women stirred cauldrons of tar, stirring smoke into the air until resinous musk clung to stone. Arianne appeared, shawl braided into her hair. No jewel adorned her throat. She needed none. She brought a cup of nettle tea, and they drank in silence, watching the castle rouse into a hive. John marveled at how swiftly despair might turn to motion once a spark ignited. Meryn joined shortly after, bearing a sheaf of letters freshly penned. "I send riders to Bronzegate and Tarth," he reported. "If they hear Storm's End stands, they may break from the king's tithe." He handed a scroll to John. "One for your sister. She will measure whether our pact rings hollow or not." "They?" John weighed the parchment as though its seal burned his flesh. "Sansa commands the North's embassies," he said. "She will listen. If she listens, half the realm may follow." The hours unfurled in hurried stitches. John labored shoulder to shoulder with blacksmiths, hammering rust from chain. Ghost trailed him, occasionally barking at gulls that wheeled scavenger arcs above. By midday, 9 hulks lay stripped upon the tide flats, rigged with patchwork sails of fraying cloth. Beneath each deck, the dung tar bundles cured in the sun. At high tide's cusp, castle winches dragged the husks to water. Sailors aboard coracles nudged them into formation, 3 by 3 by 3, spaced so they resembled an escort screen. Frowned at from a distance, they might pass for lean, fast war galleys. The sun sank behind a veil of bruised clouds. Wind shifted east-northeast, as though summoned to task. Storm's End's warhorn moaned, deep, mournful. Ropes were cut. 9 phantoms drifted, canvas bellies swelling. Torches flew from the walls, landing upon dung-coated hides. Smoke plumed, billowing black, trailing like tattered banners behind the boats. John watched from the outer barbican, arms folded. His chest felt emptier than hunger, though he had eaten a bowl of thick pottage not an hour before. Into that emptiness rushed hope, not the brash, brandless kind, but wary, weather-beaten hope like an old sellsword picking up blade again. Moonrise unveiled the bay in shards of silver. The decoys slid across the water in spectral silence. Farther seaward, lights aboard the king's galleys changed. Lanterns doused, others sparked alight. Hulls pivoted, formation buckling. A single mirthless horn brayed from the flagship. Sails refilled. Oars churned. John exhaled. "They bite. Like trout gaping for fly," Gendry muttered, knuckles white upon the rampart stone. Minutes crawled. 2 of the decoys collided, masts tangling. An unscripted gift. For the sudden bloom of smoke likely looked to distant eyes like flaming pitch spilled across decks. A shout drifted faint over wave. The enemy admiral, perhaps, rallying. Then came the moment John prayed for. The crescent line of black hulls opened, detachments spilling forth to intercept the smoldering convoy. Galleys peeled wide, exposing a slender channel into the roadstead. Arianne raised a gloved hand. From atop the drum tower a beacon fire flared, 3 pulses. On cue. 6 true supply galleys scraped from the lee of the promontory, sails already fat with the freshening breeze. Their hulls painted stone gray. They melted across moonlit crests like gulls' shadows. John felt each heartbeat as a hammer against his ribs. One misstroke of oar, one errant spark, and Merton's scorpions might pivot. Yet the admiral's attention fixed upon the burning hulks. He did not notice a crescent of seafolk skiffs that lashed grapnels to his starboard flanker, boarding in a flurry of curved blades. The decoy ruse became a melee. Merton's war line devolved in chaos. The supply galley skimmed past them all like swallows. Cheers erupted upon the seawall. Bread had slipped through the blockade. Life would cling a little longer. But storms seldom end meekly. Two enemy cogs, slower to react, found themselves pinched against a shoal by their own fellows. A snap of wind slammed them beam to beam, and the ships locked. Sparks from one smoking decoy drifted, caught rigging, and in an eye-blink pitchless canvas kindled anyway. Fire leapt mast to mast. Orange glare painted the bay, and John glimpsed faces on distant decks, mouths open in horror, limbs flailing as they leapt for cold salvation. He gripped a crenel as screams reached the wall, carried by wind. No victory tasted sweet, drizzled in anguish. Gendry's jaw clenched. Pull survivors if they drift near the breakwater, he ordered a sergeant. These are foes, but not yet corpses. Soldiers scrambled with hooks and rope nets. John silently applauded the compassion. When dawn spilled pale gold across exhausted water, the king's fleet lay in tatters. Two galleys burnt to the waterline. One sprung on a reef. Sails hurled across wave like shed skin. What remained had withdrawn beyond bowshot. The Sunspear's Grace rode at anchor inside the harbor, holds lighter, banners bright with dew. John descended to the inner court, shoulders aching, scorched eyes half blinded by the sleepless night. Squires hurried past, carrying baskets of black bread, Storm's End's first fresh loaves in moons. Cooks stewed orange slices with barley to sweeten bowls for children huddled in alcoves. The castle breathed. By a rain-damp arch, he found Arianne. She had exchanged her shawl for a plain leather jerkin, hair plaited tight. Despite weariness, pride lit her features, as though the dawn itself reflected from her. He approached, words faltered. She answered the silence by stepping near enough. He felt warmth radiate between them. Her hand rose, traced a streak of soot upon his cheek, thumb rubbing until the skin tingled raw. Did she? We gave them hope, she murmured. Hope births mightier armies than gold. He closed his eyes to the touch. Around them, sparrows chirped among ivy. Somewhere, ghosts padded after a kitchen boy, carrying a trencher of scraps. John opened his mouth, but an urgent voice cut through. Lords and lady, rider on the King's Road," cried a lookout dashing across the yard. "Flies a white banner with Direwolf and Son conjoined." John stiffened. Arianne's brows lifted. They hastened to the barbican where the portcullis hung jagged like broken teeth. Beyond, a lone figure reined a lathered palfrey, cloak sodden, mud-streaking gambeson and greaves. The device stitched upon the standard snapped in gust. Grey direwolf entangled with seven-rayed son of Dorne, rendered in silver thread. Jon's pulse quickened. The rider pulled back hood, revealing a face John had not dreamt to see in such a place. Tousled auburn hair damp with sweat. Pale eyes fierce even under exhaustion. Sansa Stark looked upon Storm's End, with the composure of a queen surveying her own gate, though her cheeks flushed from hours' hard riding. Her voice carried across the open pit. "I would parley with my brother, and with the Princess of Dorne, under peace of the gods." Arianne glanced at John. "Your sister gallops swift. She leads the north," John said, throat tight. He motioned to the wardens. "Raise the gate." When Sansa dismounted inside the yard, she came first to John, eyes brightening, though protocol warred with affection. He drew her into an embrace. The chill of dawn clung to her cloak, but her body trembled not from cold, rather some tremor wrought of high stakes. She stepped back, studying his face. "You smell of smoke and horse and seawater," she said softly. "And I never thought it would comfort me so." John smiled, lines around his eyes deepening. "You rode hard. I rode for something harder still." She turned to Arianne, inclining her head. "Princess, thought, your couriers outpace ravens. Beddermax. Some truths must arrive on living lips," Arianne answered, voice as warm as Dornish noon. Sansa produced a small coffer sealed with white wax. "I come with mandates of Winterfell's council. The North cannot ignore whispers of a pact of Sunspear, less still the news that Jon Snow stands at its heart." Jon sensed the yard's hush as soldiers and sailors recognized titles, but not yet nuance. He gestured toward the map tower. Inside then, in the quiet chamber, Sansa set the coffer on the oak table, broke the seal, and withdrew 2 items, a folded parchment bearing the direwolf seal, and a circlet of dark steel chased with small chips of garnet. "I bring you more than words," she said, addressing Jon. "I bring you inheritance long denied." She held up the circlet. "Our brother Robb's crown, fashioned in Riverrun, born but briefly. When mother carried his bones north, she bore this too. I kept it hidden until a day came when blood and justice might align." Jon reached but stopped short. "Sansa, hear me." Her gaze blazed, daring interruption. "The North prospers beneath my rule, yet the realm's wounds fester all around, and contagion knows no wall. Prince Meryn's envoys vow a covenant without tyranny, beyond the Iron Throne's grasp. If the North remains aloof, we doom the rest to perpetual fracture. Yet the North will follow only a Stark, or you are... Volk?" Arianne watched intently. Meryn, hands behind his back, stepped silent as a cat near the hearth. Sansa pressed on. "I offer fealty, not to a king, but to a pact of realms free, led by you and the princess, each realm sovereign yet allied. Your line stands both shield and bridge." Jon closed his eyes, pulse thundering. The weight of silent years, bastard in hallways, Night's Watch oath, broken vows, butchered love, descended swift. He remembered Maester Aemon's voice. A Targaryen alone in the world is a terrible thing. He was not alone now. Could he dare accept? When he opened his eyes, tears pricked edges, but his voice held steady. "I would never take a crown again. Too much blood has been paid for guilt." "Dar." Sansa set the circlet down. "Then wear it so others may lay theirs aside. Sometimes a crown is a cup. We drink sorrow that others need not." A hush fell, broken by the soft thunk of Arianne's palm settling atop Jon's hand. Fingers intertwined, her warmth seeping into his chilled skin. "A promise once made is water in desert," she whispered. "Let us not lose it to sand." Jon looked to Meryn. The prince inclined his head. "I summoned you to heal a realm. A healer must wield tools sharp and keen." He gestured to the crown. "Temper it in duty, not desire." Jon's gaze returned to Sansa. He saw not the porcelain child of Winterfell, but a woman forged in courtly intrigues, tempered by loss. She offered not dominion, but an anvil upon which hope might be hammered into shields. He lifted the crown, felt its cold kiss against knuckles scarred by ice and battle. He did not place it on his head. Instead, he set it upon the table between himself and Arianne. "We will bear it together," he said. "Not as king and queen, but as stewards of a pack. May it remind us of cost uncounted." Namnatanam. Sansa's shoulders eased, relief mingling with resolve. Arianne's lips curved, neither victory nor seduction, but solidarity. Thus in a storm-damp tower above the rack of Shipbreaker Bay, 3 souls convened, not for conquest, but for covenant. Outside, gulls mewed upon rising thermals. Ghost howled once, long and low, and his song braided with the wind until stone itself seemed to hum. They spent that day weaving strategies. How to feed the marches when river routes remained fraught. How to courthouse Tarth with trade in sapphire and wool. How to lure the Arbor's vintners away from a king who taxed cask and cork alike. Gendry joined, fists stained with charcoal from forge work, lending insights on sailors' loyalties and shipwright gossip. Meryn plotted courier lines across the Boneway, promising silver for each day saved. Every voice mattered, and Jon listened, speaking rarely. Yet when he did, the words felt carved of bedrock. Evening crept over windows. Servants brought platters of citrus-roasted fowl and trenchers sodden with gravy thick as dusk. Hunger overcame debate. They ate standing, laughter tentative but real. For a moment, Jon felt what Daenerys must have dreamt, a fellowship of banners beneath one horizon, not one throne. After candles sputtered low, Sansa asked for a fresh horse. She would ride to Bronzegate at first light. Jon protested, but she shook her head. Speed is our ally, secrecy our shield. Let false rumors multiply faster than truth, until truth arrives sword in hand. She clasped his hand hard, nails biting. I trust you. Do not falter. When she departed, ghostly lantern light limned her path down the stair, and Jon sighed into the chill. Arianne touched his elbow. Fear not. She wears steel beneath velvet. I fear more for what lies ahead than any road behind. He turned, brushing stray curl from her brow. We sew a tapestry of realms, but thread frays where many hands pull taut. Then let our hands guide the loom. She rose to her toes and kissed him soft. Come, steward of the pack. Rest before dawn steals us anew. Namder. They walked side by side through hushed corridors where torches hissed like rain on iron. Ghost followed. Pause silent. Outside, the sea muttered its endless refrain. But within storms and a fragile hush settled, like the pause between thunderclaps when the world waits to decide if the storm will break or pass. In a modest chamber they found respite. Candles flickered low, painting amber across worn tapestries depicting griffins and storms. Jon shed jerkin and boots, flesh stiff with fatigue, but warmth bled back when Arianne nestled against him under woolen coverings. They spoke little, breaths mingling, hearts easing into a shared rhythm. No title could name what passed between them, neither lover nor ally alone. Something older, perhaps. Two rivers converging, their waters mingling until the line between lost. Outside, lightning stitched the horizon, yet thunder rolled farther than before, its fury spent. The blockade broken, storm's end nourished, the north stirred, and Dorne pledged, small victories, yet in such stitches great banners are sown. Jon drifted toward sleep, thinking of weirwoods rustling above white snow, of orange blossoms trembling under desert stars, of dragons, once thought extinct, whose legacy burned within his veins. Somewhere beyond tomorrow, a realm waited, not untouched by sorrow, but unshackled from fear. He dreamt of a garden in Sunspear where children chased fireflies, their laughter rising like larks. A boy with hair black as midnight and eyes of molten gold balanced on the rim of a fountain, arms outstretched, unafraid of the water's depth. A girl with russet curls teased him, splash by splash, until both were drenched and radiant beneath a sun that seemed unable to set. In the dream Jon watched them, neither king nor stranger, only father. Arianne stood beside him, smile lifted to sky. The wheel lay shattered at their feet, forgotten, its jagged spokes sprouting flowers where rust yielded to new life. When dawn touched the horizon, Jon woke to gull cry and the comforting weight of Arianne's head on his shoulder. Outside, roosters crowed. A scent of fresh bread filtered through the shutter slats. Storm's end alive again. He rose, kissed her brow, and dressed in quiet. She stirred, whispers of linen. Another day, she murmured, eyes half misted with sleep. Another stone laid. He buckled sword belt, and then he yet to haul. She sat, hair rivering over her collarbone. I will haul them with you, sand grain to mountain. He smiled gently, then made for the door. But her voice halted him. Your sister brought a crown. In Dorne we melt old crowns into new. Shape differs, gold remains. She tilted her head. When the time comes, let us forge not a circle, but a clasp, joined, open, never severing. A clasp can fasten banners, yet release them when winds shift. Jon considered. A clasp then, for realms that choose to stand together, for realms, and for us. Her gaze softened to a promise. He nodded, heart steady. For us. In the corridor, Ghost waited, tail low, eyes bright. Together they descended into a castle stirring to purpose. Smiths at anvils, sailors coiling lines, couriers saddling fresh mounts. The air smelled of storm-washed stone and burgeoning hope. Jon paused beneath a slit window overlooking the sea. Enemy galleys rode at cautious distance, masts bent by ragged canvas. No doubt ravens already winged toward King's Landing, bearing tales of a blockade broken by smoke and daring. Aegon would not sit idle. War might yet come roaring, iron claws unfurled. But for now, the water between Storm's End and sky lay still save the tireless tide. And in that stillness possibility took root. Jon Snow inhaled salt and possibility alike. He laid a scarred hand upon Ghost's head, and together they stepped into the courtyards where hammers struck rhythms of determination, and banners of sun and wolf alike fluttered, no longer foes nor strangers, but threads of a tapestry newly begun. K. A hush of silver twilight crept across the ramparts as Jon paced the uppermost walk of Storm's End, his boots rasping softly against the ancient stone. The wind from the bay carried the taste of brine and cinders. Far below, the battered remnants of the king's fleet withdrew in sullen retreat, oars biting choppy surf, banners limp in surrender to the night. The sky overhead shivered with the last threads of the storm, clouds unraveling to reveal the first bright stars. Jon paused at a crenelle, the raw edge of the world beneath his hands. Behind him, the castle throbbed with activity, stewards clearing the yard of fire-blackened driftwood, smiths hammering plates for new shield bands, the stables echoing with the restless snorts of horses who had sensed the tension in the stones all night. He stood motionless, letting the cold bite his skin. With every breath, he weighed the enormity of what had begun. The ruse upon the water had worked, the blockade broken, hope pouring into Storm's End with every sack of barley and every barrel of sweet Dornish wine. Yet this was only the first pebble in a landslide. He could feel the earth shifting beneath the realm, could sense the hungry reach of rumor spreading on every merchant's tongue. A pact forged in the quiet of night would soon echo in every lord's hall and every muddy lane from White Harbor to the Shadow City. He thought of Sansa, already gone before sunrise, riding out beneath banners stitched with wolf and sun. She carried the promise of the North in her saddlebag, the weight of their childhood in her bones. Sansa, who had learned too well the games of courts and queens. If she could trust in this pact, this vision of a realm ruled not by fear or fire, but by promise and parity, then so could he. Soft footsteps sounded behind him. Jon turned to find Arianne approaching. Her cloak gathered close, hair unbound and trailing over her shoulders like a river of night. She moved quietly, every line of her posture alert and sure. He could smell the faint spice of her skin, the hint of orange and sun-warmed stone. She came to stand beside him, hands folded on the parapet. "The wind speaks of change," she said, eyes on the moon. But change is a jealous thing. It always demands more. Now, he watched her. The turn of her jaw, the gleam of firelight in her eyes. "We ask a lot of the realm," Jon said. "We ask them to set aside vengeance and pride. That's more than any king's ever managed." Arianne smiled, a shadow's curve. "A king rules by demand. We lead by pact. That is our only advantage, Jon Snow. We offer something no dragon or lion ever could." He turned back to the bay, where a handful of lanterns still bobbed. The last of the supply ships easing toward the safety of the quay. "When the news reaches King's Landing," he said, "Aegon will not forgive it." She shook her head. "No. He will call it treason and send his banners. But for the first time, it will not be one kingdom alone he faces. Sunspear stands with you." "Storm's End stands with you? The North listens? That is more than any pretender ever had." Jon looked at her, feeling the weight of those words settle into the marrow of his bones. "How did you know it would work?" Arianne's gaze was calm as dawn. "I didn't. But you did not shrink from the risk. You led. That is the way of it." "Bauma." He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the sea air ruffle his hair. Remembering the frozen watchtowers of his youth. The stone bench in the crypts where Ned Stark had once told him that the world was not fair, and that a man must do his duty all the same. He felt the echo of those words now, the shape of them remade by the fire beside him. Arianne touched his hand. "There will be other storms. Meryn already drafts letters to the river lords and the Mander. He'll send gold and promises, and there will be some who heed him. The Vale is more cautious, but the Knights of the Gates are not fools. They see the horizon darkening." "Nani? Siwi? And the Reach?" Jon asked. "They've never followed a wolf, nor a dragon." Arianne's lips quirked. "They will follow their purses. If Storm's End remains open and Dorne's caravans flow north, the Reach will come begging to trade. Lords love gold more than they hate dragons. She pulled a scroll from her belt, a message sealed in yellow wax, sunburst and pressed deep. Meryn's draft, a letter of alliance for House Tyrell, to be delivered by my hand and yours. We ride at dawn. Jon raised an eyebrow. You trust the Reach not to poison us at supper? She grinned, feral and bright. They may try, but Dorne's poisons are subtler, and our message will be delivered before any knife can find our backs. He smiled despite himself, then sobered, scanning the distant darkness. How far can this go? How long before Aegon answers with more than ships? Arianne's voice dropped low. He will answer soon. But there are more who hunger for something different. The small folk, the traders, the free cities, all look for some hope not rimmed in blood. You are that hope, Jon Snow. You and I, together. Blood and sun. Vensay. He squeezed her hand. We should rest. The road is long. She nodded, her gaze lingering on the moon, as if searching for an omen. We'll have precious little rest before this is done. They walked together from the ramparts, their shadows mingling on stone. Down in the yard, Gendry stood with Meryn, heads bent over a map spread atop a wine cask, their voices low and urgent. Sentries called the changing of the watch, and the castle stilled, the hush before the next rising of the tide. Jon and Arianne parted in the corridor, and he paused at his chamber door, listening to the castle's slow breathing, the shifting of old bones in new beds. Ghost waited for him within, stretched before the hearth, eyes glowing faint in the gloom. Jon knelt beside the wolf, scratching behind one ear, comforted by the animal's steady presence. He let the weight of the day drain from his shoulders, though sleep hovered beyond his reach. For a long while he sat in darkness, thinking of his father's face, of Sam's laughter, of Arya's wild grin, and of Daenerys' eyes, silver in the firelight. All the living and the dead who had shaped him, carried him to this moment. He rose before the sun, the sky still deep indigo over the sea. By the time the castle began to rouse, he was dressed, armor donned, sword belted at his hip. In the yard, riders gathered, 10 Stormlander men-at-arms, 5 Dornish lancers, Meryn himself with a company of couriers, Arianne in supple leather and mail. They ate a quick meal of hard bread and smoked fish, then mounted, Sansa's standard stitched anew to a willow staff and lashed to Jon's saddle, direwolf and son entwined. Ghost ranged ahead, a ghost in the waking mists. They rode through the morning, following the coastal track east toward Bitterbridge, the land rolling in wild green and gold beneath the wheeling cry of gulls. At their flanks rode Gendry's men, shields battered but spirits high. Behind, Dornish archers with orange plumes in their helms. The first day was uneventful, save the stares of shepherds and fishermen who watched the passage of banners with wide-eyed awe. By noon they crossed the Roserad, and Jon saw firsthand what hardship had done to the realm. Villages sat half-empty. Fields fallow where once they had bloomed thick with barley. Small folk stood in lines for pottage at the lord's halls, sullen and wary, their faces gaunt. More than once, riders passed the carcass of an ox or a horse, stripped to bone by hunger and theft alike. Arianne watched it all with keen, narrowed eyes. This is not just the king's war, Jon. This is the war of neglect. When kings take and give nothing back, the land sickens. Jon agreed, and that sickness spreads. By dusk they made camp beside a shallow stream, pitching tents beneath a copse of twisted willows. Meryn joined Jon and Arianne for supper, spreading a fresh map across a blanket. He traced their route to Bitterbridge, then farther north. If we ride fast, we reach Highgarden in 5 days. Tyrell's spies will know we approach before we ever see his walls. Arianne propped her chin on her fist. Do we go openly, or do we ride as traitors? Jon glanced between them. Openly, if we are to be taken seriously. We must be seen. Meryn nodded. Then I will send a courier ahead with your letter and my own. It will arrive before us by 2 days. Arianne poured wine, passing a cup to Jon. You are certain you trust Lord Tyrell? Jon hesitated. No, but I trust that he will do what profits him. He will not risk the anger of Storm's End, Dorne, and the North, if he can join us and profit instead. Let's hope you're right, Meryn murmured. They finished the meal in silence, each lost in thought, the future sprawling ahead of them like the shadowed river beyond the trees. That night, Jon lay beneath his cloak and listened to the quiet. In the tent beside his, Arianne slept with a blade beneath her pillow, dreams troubled by the memory of sand snakes lost to war and the old wounds of Dorne. Meryn spoke quietly with his men, discussing the slow bloom of rebellion across the marches. Jon felt a strange peace settle within him, a certainty that whatever storm waited at Highgarden, they would meet it together. In the early hours, as the stars faded and the world turned blue, a commotion roused the camp. Jon was up and armed before the first shout echoed among the willows. He emerged to find a small group of ragged riders approaching. Half a dozen men, led by a gaunt fellow with a copper beard and a patch sewn where his left eye should have been. They flew a scrap of green and gold cloth, and behind them rode a girl hardly more than 12, her dress torn and muddied. Gendry met them at the edge of camp, shield up. Jon strode to his side, sword at the ready, Arianne not far behind. The copper-bearded man reined in, hands open. "We seek Lord Snow," he called, voice hoarse. "We bear news from the Mander." Jon stepped forward, sword at his side. "You've found him. Speak." The man bowed in the saddle. "My lord, I am Donal of Long Table, once in service to House Caswell. The girl is Lady Margaery, daughter of Loras Tyrell and heir of Oakenshield." Jon's eyes narrowed. "What brings you here?" Donal's voice trembled. "My lord, Highgarden has fallen into chaos. Sir Hobber Tyrell's men seized the gatehouse, claiming orders from the king, but the Reach is divided. Lord Tyrell's council has split. Half wish to send men to King's Landing, half to join with you. Lord Willis sends his daughter to you for safety. She is a pledge of his intent. Now?" Jon exchanged a glance with Arianne, who nodded subtly. A pawn, perhaps, but a valuable one. He approached the girl, who met his gaze steadily despite her weariness. Her eyes, dark and intelligent, flicked from him to Arianne, to the banners and back again. "Are you Lord Snow?" she asked, voice clear. "I am Jon," he answered. "You are safe here, Lady Margaery." The girl's chin lifted, proud despite the dirt streaking her face. "My father says you are the true hope for peace, that you have the blood of dragons and the heart of a wolf." "Norisandi." Jon crouched to her level. "Your father is wise to one piece." She nodded solemnly, then let herself be led to the fire, where a cook brought her a bowl of stew and a woolen blanket. The camp gathered, curiosity mingled with relief. News from Highgarden was good news for all who wished to avoid the king's wrath. Arianne leaned close as Jon straightened. "If Willis Tyrell sends his heir to us, he means to join." Jon watched the girl, small and composed amid a knot of armored men. "Or he means to buy time while he chooses." Arianne shrugged. "Either way, she's our guest now." By dawn, the camp moved with new purpose. Meryn sent fresh couriers to Tumbleton and Ashford, seeking to rally more Reachmen to their cause. Gendry dispatched his men to patrol the roads, wary of Kingsmen who might follow the girl's trail. They reached Bitterbridge by noon, the town half empty, the bridge itself guarded by a nervous band of crossbowmen in faded Tyrell livery. At sight of the Wolf and Sun banners, the men wavered, then lowered their weapons, bowing low as Jon and Arianne crossed at the head of their party. Small folk watched from shuttered windows, the hush broken only by the plodding hooves and the soft clang of armor. On the far side, a troop of Tyrell men awaited. An older knight in green and gold, his hair gone to white, a great sunflower stitched on his cloak. He introduced himself as Sir Maynard Crane, sworn to Lord Willis. "You are welcome in the Reach, Lord Snow," he said gravely. "Lord Willis awaits you at Oakenshield." Jon inclined his head. "We come in peace and with hope for alliance." Sir Maynard bowed. Peace is a rare and precious coin these days. Lord Willis seeks to gather it where he can. The journey continued, now under the watchful eyes of Reachman and their lord. Villages emerged from hiding to watch the passage, children tossing flowers in the road, their mothers hushing them lest a wrong color catch the eye of a loyalist patrol. At Oakenshield, a manor of weathered stone set high above the Mander, Willis Tyrrell awaited with a council of bannermen. He greeted John and Ariane in a sun-drenched hall, a brace of greyhounds at his feet. Willis' face was calm, his body still, crippled legs stretched before him. His eyes, sharp and green, missed nothing. "Lord Snow, Princess Martell, you bring storms and suns in your wake," he said, voice even. "You bring hope and peril. Which is the greater?" John met his gaze. "Both. But hope lasts longer." Ariane added, "We offer alliance, not submission. The Reach can prosper again, if it stands apart from the king's ruin, and with the promise of a new pact." Willis studied them, then motioned to Margaery, who clung to his hand. "My daughter trusts you. That is more than I can say for half my council. But trust grows. Let us see what sun and wolf can sew together." They spoke long into the night, discussing tides and trade, roads and rivers, the need for bread and for justice. Willis promised riders to the marches and the Mander, scouts to watch the king's approach. The Reach would not move openly yet, but neither would it raise arms for Aegon. "Time buys alliances," Willis murmured, "and alliances buy peace." John nodded, understanding that for now, that was all he could ask. The pact was growing, one hesitant pledge at a time. Each step forward was a stone on the road, a road built not by kings, but by the hands of those who had suffered too much and hoped for better. In the days that followed, the company pressed north. The banners of Wolf and Son joined now by the flower of Tyrell. With every mile, more small folk came to cheer, and more lords sent envoys, offering supplies or promises, or only cautious hope. Word spread faster than any raven could fly. A new alliance, a pact not of conquest, but of concord. At Ashford, they met a dozen bannermen from the Stormlands, ready to swear oaths to John and Ariane. At Cider Hall, House Fossaway pledged support if their apple orchards might flow once more into Dorne and the north. With every new camp, John saw the weight of the crown grow lighter. Not a burden of gold and gilt, but a mantle of service, the trust of thousands offered freely, not taken at sword point. On the 10th day, word reached them that the king's banners had been sighted, marching south from King's Landing in full array. Sir John Mertens led what remained of the blockading fleet upriver, his hulls now flying the Red Dragon on black, but the towns he passed offered no supplies, no shelter. At the crossings, villagers raised the pact's colors, and the king's men passed on in silence, hungry and hollow-eyed. John knew that the time for peace would soon give way to the demands of war, yet he felt no fear. The pact was more than an army. It was an idea, and ideas once sown took root in every heart that had ever suffered under a king's whim. In the dusk before Highgarden, John stood with Ariane and Willis, watching the sun slip behind the walls. The gardens below glowed gold, the air sweet with the scent of roses. Children played in the meadows, their laughter floating like birdsong through the warm twilight. Ariane took John's hand, her grip firm. "This is how realms change," she said softly. "Not with fire and sword, but with bread and trust and promise. Remember that, when the banners rise again." He nodded, drawing her close, feeling the thrum of hope between them. As night fell, he looked out over the gathered camps, the tents of every house, Wolf and Son, Flower and Stag, each banner joined in the evening breeze. A new realm waited, fragile as dawn, but growing, line by line, hand by hand, oath by oath. Jon Snow breathed deep, the scent of roses and rain on the air, and understood at last what it meant to lead, not by right of blood or the iron weight of a crown, but by the slow, stubborn courage to believe that tomorrow could be made anew. I see. On the first morning, the banners of Wolf, Son, and Flower rippled together beneath the dew-jeweled walls of Highgarden. Jon Snow felt as if he had wandered into a memory of a world that might have been. The city sprawled below the castle, rooftops pale in the rising mist. The air rich with the scent of honey, new hay, and 1,000 blooms whose names he could not guess. Every tower, every hedge maze and gilded dome, glittered with promise under the soft hammer of dawn. He walked alone through the gardens before the day's work began. Every step crushed petals underfoot. Bees drifted around his boots, fat with nectar, untroubled by the gathering storm. Beyond the maze in the fields, the camps of the pact sprawled in growing confidence. Stormlander knights tossing coins with Dornish spearmen, Reachman cooks boiling barley with onions and oranges, a handful of Northmen in heavy furs despite the warm air. All kept carefully apart from the Tyrell guard, but glancing over, curious as if trying to measure what new thing was growing beneath these boughs. Jon's own tent stood on a gentle rise among willows, his name on every tongue, though he felt himself a shadow moving through the light. He had worn a crown only once, then cast it aside, but each day the circle of his responsibilities drew tighter. Sansa's letters from the north, Marin's daily counsels, Arianne's quiet certainty at his side, the careful negotiations that spilled late into every evening and began again with the sun. Sometimes he wondered how Daenerys had borne it, the loneliness of command. Yet here, as the morning haze burned away, it was not loneliness he felt, but an odd, bright kinship, a sense that every word, every oath, every hand, grasped in the last 10 days, had built something new and fragile, something worth defending. He found Willis Tyrell on a shaded bench overlooking the river, hounds at his feet, scribbling notes to his steward. The Lord of Highgarden's left leg stretched before him, braced with a cunning iron frame, but he rose with dignity as Jon approached. He was a man of quiet authority, thoughtful and deliberate, not given to bluster. "The river is up a finger since yesterday," Willis said, by way of greeting, nodding toward the slow brown water winding past the orchards. "A sign of rain in the mountains. My father would say it's a good omen. I say, let the rain come. Better wet grain than blood." Jon settled beside him, glancing down at the parchment in Willis' hand. More letters. Always more. House Tarly's envoys arrived last night. They'll not join us openly. Randall is too proud to break faith with Aegon while there's coin to be had from the east. But his sons grow restless. Dickon commands a company of knights who will not be eager to break the bread of traitors, but they may yet be persuaded with promises of amnesty and land. Willis folded the parchment. "It's like coaxing a rose to bloom in winter, Lord Snow. You warm the earth, you water and wait. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, a flower comes." Jon looked across the river to where the Tarly tents had appeared overnight, banners furled, their patrols close and tight. "And sometimes, you get thorns." Willis laughed, low and genuine. "True, dull, but better thorns than blight." He gestured at the distant fields, where farmers bent over muddy furrows. "These people have suffered more from blight than from thorns these past years. Aegon's men requisition their grain, and his tacksmen count every barrel. The Reach is tired of being the king's larder and his gold coffer." Jon considered the words. The Reach was the breadbasket of the realm. Armies marched and starved by its favor. "If Highgarden commits openly," he said quietly, "the king will strike at you first. He cannot afford to lose your grain or your coin. We'll need to be ready." "We will be." Willis glanced sideways, his green eyes clear and cool. "The question is, will you?" Jon felt the weight of the question in his marrow. "If I weren't, I would have stayed in the north, or gone back to the wall." Willis nodded, satisfied. "Good. There's talk enough of prophecy and bloodlines, dragon dreams and wolves and gods, and what it means to lead. But most of that is mist and rumor. What matters is this: when the harvest comes, will the men and women in these fields eat, or will they starve? Will their children be safe in their beds, or will they die screaming in fire and smoke? My father used to say, feed your people, and you'll be lord for 100 years. Fail them once, and no bloodline can save you." Jon studied him, seeing for the first time, not the crippled air of Reach rumor, but a man who had survived by listening and learning in a world that valued strength. You have my word. I'll not ask more than these people can give, nor take from them what is not mine. Willis smiled thinly, the lines at his eyes deepening. I think you mean it, Lord Snow. I hope it will be enough. The bells of Highgarden called the hour, a gentle peal. Jon rose, shaking the stiffness from his limbs. We meet with the lords at midday. Willis nodded. And with Lord Tarley's sons. Their oaths may be the difference between victory and ruin. Jon turned toward the keep, his thoughts already racing ahead. Behind him the river flowed on, indifferent, carrying last year's leaves and this year's hopes alike toward the distant sea. In the outer ward, he found Arianne watching a party of her Dornish archers drill in the morning light, the orange plumes in their helms catching fire in the sun. She smiled as he approached, her hands folded in the deep sleeves of a pale blue gown, her posture as graceful as any queen. You look troubled, she observed. Did the Lord of Roses offer you his thorns? He offered wisdom and a warning. I think he trusts me, but he'll not risk his people unless we're prepared to hold what we gain. Arianne nodded. He's right. We are not conquerors, Jon. We are builders. And builders must defend their work. She looked past him, eyes sharpening. There is news. A rider from Oldtown, Sir Baelor Hightower himself. Jon's brow furrowed. Oldtown's loyalty has always been for sale. What does Hightower want? She gestured, and moments later, Sir Baelor appeared. A tall man, lean and sharp-eyed in mail of silvered steel, his surcoat stitched with the pale lantern tower of his house. He bowed, every inch the knight. Lord Snow, Princess Martell, Lord Willis bade me speak with you at once. My father, Leighton, Lord of Oldtown, sends his greeting and his caution. Men, Jon inclined his head. We are always eager for the wisdom of Oldtown. Baelor's eyes flickered, weighing Jon's words. My father is cautious by nature, but no fool. He watches the king's court decay, and the citadel grows restive. Too many hungry mouths, too many refugees, too much silver flowing out to the east, and not enough flowing in. Oldtown will not break faith with the crown yet, but we will not raise sword against you, so long as you offer safety to the city and its ships. My father asks for assurances. Niamantol. Jon considered. No harm will come to Oldtown, nor to the citadel if they offer us neutrality. Let the Hightowers stand watch over their city and their grain, and we will do the same. Baelor bowed again. You have our thanks. I'll carry word to my father. As the knight departed, Arianne exhaled in relief. A powerful city, that one, and more powerful when silent than when shouting. Jon nodded, understanding. Every lord brought a price. Some gold, some grain, some simply the right to be left alone. It was like the wall, he realized, the endless bargain of trust and fear, where peace held only so long as men believed it might. The midday council gathered in the great solar of Highgarden, where light spilled through leaded windows, painting the oaken table with shifting jewels. Lords of the Reach, of Storm's End, of Dorne, all are arrayed according to custom, their banners fluttering outside in the mild wind. Willis presided, his hounds at his feet. Meryn Martell, quiet and observant, at Jon's right, Arianne, regal and poised beside him. Gendry Baratheon took his place by the window, a shadow behind Jon, ready but silent. A hush fell as Jon rose to speak, his voice steady but low. We are not here to forge a new kingdom of swords. We are here to build a realm of peace, a realm where every house, great and small, has a voice, and every harvest feeds the mouths that earned it. The king in King's Landing sends threats and swords, but swords do not plow fields, nor feed children. Our strength is not in our armies, but in our pact, in the trust we forge here, and the hope we bring to the realm. No. He glanced at Arianne, who met his gaze with a steady pride, and at Willis, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Meryn Martell spoke next, his voice carrying the cadence of Dorne's sand and sun. The sun burns hot on the neck of those who kneel. Dorne kneels no more. We come not as conquerors, but as kin, bound by oath, by marriage, by the blood we spill to protect our own. Let this pact be as the river, sometimes split, sometimes swift, but always seeking the sea together. No one mocked. Gendry leaned forward, rough and honest. "I'm no lord's son, nor was I raised to counsel. But I know what it is to hunger, and what it is to fight for the right to call a place home. The king in King's Landing calls us traitors. I say, let him come. We'll not bend. We'll not bend." Willis' eyes were bright, his voice soft but carrying. "Let us agree then, on the terms. Grain for Dorne and Storm's End. Water rights to the marches. The lords of the Reach shall defend their own, and answer to no king who taxes them to ruin. Let the pact be sealed, by bread, by water, by the word of those present. Let the realm watch and choose for itself." Mememna. One by one, the lords rose and spoke their oaths. The lords of the marches, sons of ancient wars, agreed to ride beside the Dornish under a banner of truce. The river lords sent word of sympathy, though caution kept them from open alliance. The Vals Eyrie waited and watched, but sent grain through neutral merchants. Only the Westerlands stood apart, silent and wary, their gold buying the silence of sellswords and spies. As the council ended, Jon felt the old ache in his chest, the bone-deep exhaustion of too many battles, too much loss. Yet as he left the solar, Arianne took his hand, her grip strong and warm. "You are doing what no king ever dared," she murmured as they crossed the echoing hall. "You are binding the wounds of the realm, not by fire, but by promise. That is the greater victory." He squeezed her fingers, grateful for her certainty. "The day is not won. Aegon will strike soon. When he does, we will answer together," she said. "With sword if we must, but with hope first." The rest of the day passed in a flurry of preparation. Jon spent hours among the Stormlander knights, learning their strengths and grievances, sharing bread and stories. He watched the Dornish lancers teach the Reachmen new ways to skirmish in the fields, their long spears sweeping through the barley like sickles. He saw Northmen, sent at Sansa's behest, arrive in secret, cloaks drawn tight, carrying the news that the lords of the Rills and the Barrowlands would not march for the king, no matter what the Lannisters promised. At dusk, Jon climbed to the highest tower, where the banners snapped in the wind. The fields below shimmered with lanterns and cookfires, the laughter of soldiers and small folk alike rising to him in the gathering dark. He felt the realm breathing, broken, yes, but alive. Arianne joined him, her hair caught by the wind, eyes shining in the lantern glow. "We are ready," she said. He shook his head. "No one is ever ready." She smiled, fierce. "No one was ever ready for you." He laughed, surprised, and drew her close, her warmth grounding him in the fading light. Together, they watched as the fires of hope flickered below, joined flame to flame, banner to banner, forging the new dawn that might yet rise from the ruin of the old. But in the east, over the river, a darker fire smoldered. On the second night, news came from the marches. Aegon's vanguard, 1,000 strong, had crossed the Blackwater Rush, burning outposts and seizing the grain intended for the Riverlands. His banners, a three-headed dragon, red on black, rose above the torches, and his gold cloaks spread word that traitors would be shown no mercy. The council gathered at midnight, every face drawn and pale. Willis's voice was tight. "We must hold him at the bridges or all is lost. If he seizes the Mander, he'll starve the Reach and break the pact." Jon stood, already armored, Ghost at his side, Longclaw strapped across his back. "We ride at once. I will take the vanguard. Gendry, you lead the Stormlanders by river. Arianne, send word to Meryn, and bring the Dornish up behind." "Nan." Willis gripped his shoulder as he turned to leave. "Take my brother Garland and my best riders. May the gods watch over you." Jon nodded, the old cold calm of battle descending over him like a cloak. "We'll hold the bridges. Tell the lords, if I fall, the pact stands." He strode from the council, his heart steady. In the yard, horses stamped and whickered, banners snapping, armor shining in the torchlight. The vanguard. Stormlanders, Reachmen, a few dozen Northmen. assembled with Garland Tyrell at their head. Gendry thundered orders, his hammer slung at his back. Dornish scouts loped ahead, eyes bright in the moonlight. Arianne came to him before he mounted, her face fierce. "Do not die, Jon Snow. I have had enough of men who die for honor." He smiled, almost tender. "I'll return, I promise." She pulled him down, kissed him hard and quick. "I'll hold you to it." He swung into the saddle, Ghost pacing at his stirrup. The gates opened, and the vanguard spilled out into the night, hooves thundering on the road, banners streaming behind. The ride was hard and fast, the darkness broken by the lanterns of farmers fleeing ahead of the king's men. They passed burned farmsteads, blackened grain, oxen slaughtered in the mud. The smell of death and smoke grew stronger as they approached the bridge at Bitterbridge, where the Mander narrowed between muddy banks. The bridge was a chaos of battle, Aegon's gold cloaks clashing with Reachman, small folk screaming, flames leaping from the timbers as arrows hissed through the smoke. Jon led the charge, Longclaw gleaming, Ghost at his heels, Garland Tyrell beside him, Gendry's hammer rising and falling in a blur. The battle was short, brutal, and decisive. Jon found himself face to face with Sir Jonon Mertens, the king's admiral, sword red with blood. They fought among the burning wagons, the clangor of steel ringing out over the river. "You are no king," Merton spat. "You are a ghost in stolen flesh." Jon parried a savage thrust, driving him back. Better a ghost than a butcher. He knocked the sword from Mertenson's hand, and with one swift stroke, ended the admiral's rebellion. All around him, the pack's men rallied, pushing the gold cloaks back. By dawn, the king's vanguard was broken, the bridge held, the river safe. Jon stood on the blood-slick boards, breathing hard, the first light of morning gilding the banners overhead. Garland Tyrell clasped his arm, Gendry thumped his back, Ghost pressed close, muzzle bloody. He looked across the river to where the king's men fled, the city burning behind them, the grain safe, the pack's hope alive. He had kept his promise. By noon, word had spread. The king's vanguard broken, the bridge at Bitterbridge held by Jon Snow and his allies, the grain rolling north once more. Highgarden erupted in celebration, and Willis Tyrell sent a rider to every lord in the Reach. The pack stands, the king's wrath spent. Jon returned to the castle as a hero, but he felt only exhaustion, a bone-deep weariness that would not fade. Arianne met him at the gate, tears shining in her eyes, pride in every line of her face. "You did not die," she whispered as she embraced him, fierce and joyful. "You kept your promise." He held her close, the world spinning around them, the banners of wolf and sun and flower dancing in the wind. Above the castle, the bells rang out, calling all of Highgarden to witness a new dawn. The pact had survived its first test, and in the hearts of the people, in every loaf of bread, every harvest reaped, every hand joined in trust, Jon Snow felt the shape of a realm reborn. Eldol. The weeks that followed the battle at Bitterbridge passed in a kind of breathless, waking dream. The fields around Highgarden burst green with barley and winter wheat, and wildflowers swayed between the rows, where armored men had bled and died not a fortnight before. Word of the Pact's victory spread from the Frostfangs to the Summer Sea. Peasants carried the news faster than ravens, for every mouth that tasted new bread, every cask that rolled unpillaged north, sent its own whisper on the wind. The king's men could be beaten. The Pact could hold. Jon's face became a name spoken at market stalls and wells, in candlelit inns, and behind the closed doors of castles, where frightened lords watched their peasants cheer for a leader who did not wear a crown, and spoke not of conquest, but of promise. Wolf and sun, flower and stag, all woven together into a thing none could have predicted, and none yet dared to oppose in full. In the first days after the bridge, Jon's life dissolved into motion. Wounds to be stitched, dying men to comfort, letters to send, and 100 decisions to be weighed, none simple. The people of the Reach, so long wary of outsiders and burned by the hungry reach of past kings, found themselves opening kitchens and barns to battered Stormlanders and weary Northmen alike. The Paxmen feasted on the bounty of Highgarden, and each meal became a council of war, a celebration and an argument all at once. Arianne stood with Jon through every hour. She rode at his side to inspect the grain stores, and at night lent her calm certainty to his doubts. She brought laughter to tense meetings, soothed Gendry's frustration with a clever turn of phrase, and when the world grew silent, pressed herself against Jon in darkness, her body warm, her hair scented of citrus and smoke. In those hours, Jon felt the burden of leadership lessen, if only for a while. Willis Tyrell, cautious but resolute, emerged as a crucial ally. From his solar he sent messages by the dozen. To Tumbleton and Cider Hall, to the Arbor, to Old Town, to every hedge knight and landed knight who owed Tyrell their place. Some responded with promises, some with silence, but a few, most crucially Lord Hightower and Lady Redwine, pledged men and coin. With the Arbor's wines and Old Town's merchant fleet, the pact found its legs. Highgarden's meadows filled with men and horses, Stormlanders mending armor beside Dornish archers who taught them desert tricks, Northmen hunting boar for the evening table, Reachmen in green and gold hosting mock tourneys, where no one kept score but all wagered on the unlikely friendship between old foes. Each day, more banners joined the assembly, and each day the pact's influence grew. But every sunrise also brought warnings. Sansa's riders, pale and grave, came down from the north with letters in Sansa's careful hand. House Manderley would hold White Harbor, but House Dustin hesitated, torn by old grievances. In the Vale, Lord Royce counseled patience, but Petyr Baelish was nowhere to be found, and whispers of his gold at work in the king's camp were everywhere. Aegon had not been idle. Ravens spoke of musters in the Crownlands, and soon the Golden Company's banners flew beside the three-headed dragon along the Roserod. The king's new hand, Lord Jon Connington, moved with ruthless speed, raising levies, buying sellswords, sending out bands of ironborn reavers to strike at supply lines where the Pact's hold was weakest. Every victory Jon claimed bled into a new front, a new danger. The price of unity was unending vigilance. Yet with each threat, the Pact's resolve deepened. Garland Tyrell, fresh from victory at Bitterbridge, rode south with 200 knights to stiffen the marches, while Gendry's Stormlanders broke the king's attempt to cross the Wendwater with a daring night raid. Maron Martell worked through the sunlit courts and shadowed alleys of Highgarden, winning over the Marcher lords with gifts and promises, and Arianne brought the sharpest of her sand snakes north to aid the Pact's cause. Word spread of Lady Obara's valor at the fords, of Nymeria's whispers that stilled the doubts of wavering bannermen. In the quiet hours, Jon sometimes escaped to the garden maze above Highgarden, where wild roses and thorns tangled in endless patterns. He found peace there, if nowhere else. Arianne joined him, sometimes with news, sometimes only to walk and speak of nothing. Of her childhood in the Water Gardens, of Nymeria's legend, of the constellations above Dorne, so different from those that glittered above Winterfell. "You carry all their hopes," she told him, fingers entwined with his as they moved through the shadowed green. "Yet you never seek the center. You are always circling, seeking escape." He looked at her, thinking of how close he had come to death, not only in battle, but in the loneliness that trailed after every victory. "A man who sits in the center is always the first to die," he said, and she laughed, the sound bright as glass bells. "Then let us circle together," she whispered, "and let the world think the maze has no end." The High Septon himself arrived at Highgarden, weary and wary, surrounded by a company of silent brothers. He came not as the king's man but as a supplicant, seeking bread and assurance for the city's poor. Jon met him in the great sept of Highgarden, its candles guttering in the summer heat, and promised sanctuary to any who asked it. "We will feed the hungry," Jon vowed, "no matter their gods or banners." The High Septon raised trembling hands in blessing. "Then may the Seven watch over you, Jon Snow, and all those who follow you." Letters from Sansa became the rhythm of Jon's days. Her reports were shrewd, even sly, detailing the shifting alliances among northern lords, the cautious overtures from Braavos, the approach of a fleet from White Harbor carrying food and arms. "Do not trust every smiling face," she warned, "but neither must you see enemies in every shadow. Our cause will win by hope, not by fear. Hold fast. It was Sansa who first wrote of Arya's return. She came to Winterfell at dusk, riding a pale horse and wearing the face of a stranger. Bran knew her at once. She says little of her years away, but the men call her Wolf Girl, and her presence is like a knife in the darkness, sharp and silent, yet oddly comforting. She asks after you, and after Ghost. I think she will ride south soon. Jon read those words again and again, longing for a reunion he could not imagine, but feared he would not survive to see. Word came that Arya had left Winterfell in the company of a handful of loyal spearmen, riding hard for the Riverland. Whispers ran ahead of her. Some claimed she had slain a band of Lannister knights in the woods near Harrenhal, others that she had taken the black and wore the garb of the Night's Watch. Jon smiled at the rumors, knowing that whatever Arya's true path, she would find her own way. In his dreams he saw her, running through the woods with Nymeria at her side, a ghost among ghosts. One night as Jon stood alone in the gardens, torchlight flickering on the ancient stones, a messenger from Old Town came with news that made him pause. A maester of the Citadel had declared himself for the Pact, urging the Archmaesters to offer their wisdom and healers. The maester, a man named Vaelin, was a scholar of dragons, and his letters to Jon were full of ancient prophecy and hard-won counsel. Do not trust prophecy, Vaelin wrote. Trust men and women and the choices they make. Dragons and wolves, stags and lions, these are but sigils. Men are made of flesh and hope. Shape your realm with care, and forget the stories others tell of you. Maon, the city of Old Town, sent ships with grain and medicines, though Lord Lyton kept his banners furled, unwilling to make open war unless the king himself threatened his walls. Yet his aid strengthened the pact, and the city's silent neutrality forced Aegon to turn his attention elsewhere. The Lords of the Reach met in a great council at Highgarden, hundreds gathering in the Great Hall. They arrived armored and wary, banners trailing behind them, eyes measuring Jon as if he were some strange beast. But as he spoke, quietly, plainly, without promise of reward or threat of ruin, he saw the mood shift. They were tired, all of them, tired of sending their sons to die for kings who cared nothing for their fields. Tired of famine, tired of war. We ask you for nothing you have not already given, Jon told them. Only to stand with those who would defend your homes, feed your people, and bring peace to your lands. No king's ransom, no broken oath. Only the promise that, together we are stronger than the sum of our banners. One by one, the lords rose to offer their support. Some gave oaths, some grain, some only a nod or a coin pressed into Jon's palm. But the pact grew, and with it, the hope that Westeros might find a new path. It was not only the lords who swore. In the market squares, Jon's name became a watchword. Bakers and millers, small folk and hedge knights, all began to mark their doors with a crude symbol, sun and wolf. Scratched together, an emblem of hope in a time of hunger and fear. When Aegon's men passed through, they found no bread, no shelter, no open gates. The realm was shifting, as quietly as winter slipping into spring. Yet even as hope blossomed, danger drew near. Reports arrived daily. Raiders along the coast, Lannister gold buying sellsword bands to harry the supply lines from Dorne, Connington's banners burning in the marches. The king's men did not always wear the king's colors. Some came in silence, striking by night, sowing terror. One dawn, the pack's scouts returned from the Roserad with grim news. The king himself was marching at the head of a host, golden banners flying, golden company at his side. His army was not as large as the one that had marched against the Blackfyres in the old tales, but it was hard and hungry, and behind it rode 100 knights of the King's Guard, and a dozen highborn lords eager to prove their loyalty. Jon called his council together in the shadow of Highgarden's keep. Willis Tyrell presided with a grave calm, Meryn Martell and Arianne at his side, Gendry pacing, brow furrowed. The king's host will be at our gates within a week, Willis said. He will expect us to meet him in the field, to give him the grand battle he craves. Arianne's gaze was sharp. That is his strength, and his weakness. Let him come, and let him bleed for every mile. Gendry grunted. He wants a war of banners. Give him mud, give him thorns. Let him choke on them. Jon listened, then spoke quietly. We will not give him the battle he wants. We will hold the crossings, harry his flanks, feed his army nothing but rumor and fear. When he tires, when his men grow hungry and the rains come, then we will strike. The plan was set. Garland Tyrell led his knights to block the river crossings. Dornish scouts slipped behind enemy lines, burning the king's supplies. Northmen under the banner of the wolf harried the foragers, then melted away into the woods. Every village along the king's path was emptied, the wells fouled, the stores hidden. As the king's army drew near, the fields before Highgarden were empty, save for the pack's banners, flying high on the ramparts. Aegon camped by the river, his knights angry, his men grumbling in the rain. Every day he sent envoys, demanding surrender. Every day Jon replied, "We do not yield to fear. We do not yield to hunger. We do not yield to kings." When the rains came, they fell for 3 days without pause. The king's camp turned to mud, the rivers rose, the fords became death traps. Sickness swept through the host. Jon's men waited behind their walls, dry and fed. On the 4th night, Jon led a party of riders through the storm, crossing the swollen river by secret ford. They struck the king's baggage train at dawn, setting fire to the supplies, freeing prisoners, and vanishing before the king's men could muster. The Golden Company fought bravely, but every day saw fewer banners. Inside Highgarden, Jon stood atop the walls, Arianne at his side. They watched as the king's banners drooped, then fell, one by one. By the 7th day, Aegon's host began to break apart. Lord Connington tried to rally the men, but gold buys loyalty only so long as bread lasts. Jon sent word to Willis, "Let them go. Let them return to their homes and spread the word that the pact holds. We are not conquerors. We do not burn what we would rule." By week's end, the king's army was gone. Broken, scattered, some returning to King's Landing, some melting away into the hills, some joining the pact rather than starve. Jon walked the fields, muddy and littered with broken standards, and saw not the glory of victory, but the bitter harvest of war. He ordered the dead buried, the wounded tended, the fields replanted. Arianne found him there, staring into the gray sky, his cloak streaked with mud, Ghost silent at his side. "We have won," she said softly. He shook his head. "There is no winning, only surviving, only building." She embraced him, fierce and steady. "That is enough." Above Highgarden, the banners of sun and wolf fluttered in the new breeze. Children ran laughing in the meadows, and the bells rang out, calling all to the feast. In the hall that night, Jon sat at the high table with Willas and Arianne, Gendry and Meryn, Garland and the High Septon, all gathered beneath the carved ceiling where roses and vines curled in endless patterns. Lords and ladies feasted on bread and roasted boar, sweet wines and spiced cakes. The small folk of the Reach came in by the hundred, their faces bright with hope. Willas Tyrell stood, lifting his cup. "Let it be known that in this hall, beneath this roof, a new realm has taken root. Not of one banner, but of many. Not of conquest, but of trust. Let this pact endure as long as the rivers flow, as long as the sun rises." The lords cheered. The hall shook with joy, and Jon felt for the first time that the wheel might truly be broken. Not by fire and blood, but by patience, by kindness, by the quiet courage to begin again. That night, after the feast, Jon walked the quiet corridors of Highgarden with Arianne. Lanterns flickered on the walls, casting golden pools on the floor. He paused before a window overlooking the fields. "Do you think it will last?" he asked. She slipped her hand into his, her fingers strong. "Nothing lasts forever. But what we build together, sun and wolf, blood and hope, may outlive us both. That is all any of us can hope for." He drew her close, the night soft around them, the distant sounds of laughter echoing through the halls. Somewhere in the dark, Ghost howled, and the wolves of the north answered, their voices joining with the songs of the Reach and the promises of Dorne. In that moment, Jon Snow understood at last. Peace was not the end of the story, but the place where new stories began. The pact was only the beginning, and the realm, reborn, renewed, waited for the dawn. And far to the north, in the quiet snows of Winterfell, Sansa looked out across the white fields and smiled, knowing that her brother's dream had become the hope of all Westeros. K. Beneath the summer stars, Highgarden shone like a beacon in the dark. The scent of roses wafted on every breeze, sweetening the memory of war, though the scars still showed if one knew where to look. A charred patch of ground where tents had burned, the faint lines of graves newly sodded beyond the apple orchard, the battered shields now hanging from the city gates as warnings and as trophies. For all the laughter and song that filled the castle at night, Jon knew peace was as fragile as a dream upon waking. The realm was not yet healed. Every day brought fresh tidings, some hopeful, others grim. Messengers came from the western hills with news of Lannister levies gathering in the Golden Tooth, and from the south, ravens circled Sunspear's spires with warnings of mercenaries hired in Old Volantis. Sansa's letters from Winterfell grew more frequent, her words quick and brisk, full of new alliances forged and old feuds rekindled. Arya's name cropped up in tales from the Riverlands. Some claimed she'd been seen near the ruins of Harrenhal. Others said she'd killed 3 men in an inn near Stony Sept for speaking ill of Jon's pact. Jon met each new dawn in a state of quiet anticipation, moving through Highgarden's endless halls with purpose. Every council felt more like a reckoning. The work of the pact was not only to keep the king's men at bay, but to stitch together a realm of regions and peoples who had never truly trusted one another. It was labor that never ended, and if Jon sometimes felt the weight of it pressing him into the earth, he never showed it. When he felt most overwhelmed, he rode out with Arianne at dawn to the wild edges of the Reach, where the world felt bigger than any one man's troubles. They found peace in those rides. Arianne delighted in teaching Jon the names of every flower and herb she recognized. "You must learn the Reach if you wish to hold it," she'd tease. "You cannot feed a hungry child on banners." Jon would laugh and point out the hawks overhead, or teach her the calls of crows and owls. And for a time, they were simply 2 people on horseback, not the heart of a movement. But the business of unity never truly slept. Each morning, the small folk of the Reach gathered at the castle gates with petitions. Requests for grain, for soldiers to defend a village, for coin to buy seed for the autumn sowing. Jon took these audiences seriously, and sometimes Arianne or Willis Tyrell joined him, learning the shape of people's needs in a way no lord in the Red Keep ever bothered to do. One afternoon, as the shadows lengthened and the hum of bees filled the air, a woman approached Jon's days in the market square, leading 2 children by the hand. Her dress was patched and faded, her face burned by sun and care. The younger child carried a battered wooden sword. The older, a girl with eyes too old for her years, curtsied with grave dignity. "My lord," the woman said, voice steady despite the hush that had fallen around her. "We heard there is bread here and peace. My man was pressed into the king's host and never returned. Our village burned in the fighting last spring. I ask for a place to live, work for my hands, and a future for my children." Jon rose from the simple stool he preferred over the high seat, met her gaze. "What is your name?" "Lyra, of Fallowfield." Jon nodded. "Lyra of Fallowfield, you are welcome in Highgarden. There is work to be done in the fields and kitchens. Speak with Sir Maynard at the gate, and he will see you housed and fed. Your children will have a place in the school with the others." The woman's face crumpled. She bowed low, tears on her cheeks, the children clinging to her. All around, the crowd exhaled, a release of tension that ran deeper than fear, hunger, or fire. Jon saw it in their faces. They needed a lord who would see them. Perhaps, he thought, that was all they had ever needed. Afterward, Arianne found him alone beneath the shade of an old willow, his thoughts turned inward. "That was well done," she said softly, laying her hand on his arm. "It was nothing more than any lord should do. But most do not." He looked at her, weary but not defeated. "If we win, it must be for something more than survival. If all we do is change the banners, we will have failed." She squeezed his arm. "We will not fail. I have watched you these months, Jon Snow. I have seen the way people look at you. You are hope made flesh, whether you wish to be or not. Dan de be. He smiled a little rueful. Hope is a burden. It can break a man, not if he shares it. She pressed her brow to his, whispering, "Let me bear it with you." They stood in silence, bound together by more than treaty or pact. The following weeks brought fresh signs of change. A delegation from the Riverlands arrived, Edmure Tully, gaunt but proud, with a retinue of young knights and septons. He pledged his support to the pact, though he warned that the twins remained hostile, and Harrenhal was a ruin haunted by outlaws. Not 2 days later, a ship from White Harbor glided up the Mander, sails bright with Manderley blue and white. Sir Wyman's son Willis delivered grain and salted fish, and news that House Manderley had closed its gates to the king's men, daring Aegon to try to starve the north. "We are a people who have learned patience," Willis told Jon over wine in the castle garden. "But patience must end somewhere. If the king attacks, we will ride to you with every sword we can muster." A letter from the Vale followed. The Lord's declarant would remain neutral, but offered discreet aid in silver and food. The Eyrie, ever aloof, sent no men. But neither did it answer the king's call for aid. Yet not all tidings were good. Connington's men raided villages on the Pax border, burning crops and slaughtering stragglers. The Lannisters, newly resurgent under Sir Kevin's iron-fisted leadership, seized Golden Grove and sent word to Highgarden, "Surrender your pact or see your lands burned to the roots." No answer was sent, and within days, Lord Tarley led a company of archers to reclaim the fields, sparing the small folk and hanging any man who wore the Red Lion without warrant. One evening, as Jon stood at the battlements with Ghost by his side, a rider approached under a flag of truce. It was Arya, dust-caked and silent, her eyes sharp as knives. She slipped through the gates before anyone could stop her, found Jon in Rosegarden, and embraced him as if they had never been parted. "You're thinner," she said, grinning, "and you're filthier." She laughed, the sound low and wild. "I've been living as a crow. You'd be amazed what you hear traveling with outlaws. The king is hated, Jon. Even his gold cannot buy loyalty anymore. His men are afraid." "Benrel." Jon studied her, remembering a girl with a wooden sword, a direwolf cub, and a temper that could match any Stark. "Will you stay?" She shook her head. "Not for long. There are things I must do, promises I made. But I'll fight for you when the time comes." Arianne met Arya with a wary, almost amused affection. "You are the wolf they speak of in the songs." Arya bared her teeth. "The king's men call me many things, but I only serve my family, and those you protect, Jon Snow." The weeks drew on, harvest ripening, and the fields filled with laborers. Sickness swept through the camps, but the maesters from Old Town kept it at bay with boiling water, clean bandages, and patience. The High Septon remained in Highgarden, blessing the sick and the wounded, giving the Pax cause an air of divine sanction. Rumors filtered in from the east. Daenerys Stormborn was said to have survived, gathering a host in the lands beyond the Narrow Sea, but none knew for certain. The Golden Company, bruised and diminished, pulled back toward King's Landing, and for a moment, the world seemed to pause. It was then, in the briefest peace, that Jon called his council for the most important decision yet. They met in the Solar, lords and ladies, knights and septons, the lords of the Marches and the North and Dorne, Willis Tyrell presiding with quiet strength. Jon stood, looking out over them, his heart pounding. "We are strong together, but our strength is not in swords. It is in our promise to feed, to heal, to protect. We have no king, no single banner. The time has come to decide. What shall we build if we survive?" Gendry spoke first, blunt and honest. "A council like this for all the lords. No throne, no king, every region with a voice." Arianne added, "And women with voices as well as men." Willis nodded. "Every house, high and low. The people must be heard." Edmure Tully rose. "Let there be a council for the realm. Let it meet at the harvest and at the thaw. to settle disputes, to share grain and gold. Let justice be the only crown. Jon looked around, seeing faces of hope and fear, pride and exhaustion. He thought of Ned Stark, of the Wall, of the children of the North, of the burning fields, and of Daenerys' last, haunted words. No one man, no one house shall rule. The pact is our promise. Let it stand, or let us fall together. The council agreed, each lord and lady adding a clause, an amendment. By morning, the Pact of Highgarden was sealed. Not a kingdom, but a confederation of equals. The news raced across the realm. For the first time in memory, Westeros would not kneel to one throne. In the days that followed, a delegation left Highgarden, led by Jon, Arianne, Willis, and Arya. They traveled from village to village, holding assemblies in each, inviting small folk and merchants, millers and smiths to speak. Some jeered, some pleaded, some merely watched in awe, but all were heard. At Golden Grove, a girl no older than Sansa had been at Jon's last memory of Winterfell stood and asked, "Will we be safe now? Will we have food this winter?" Jon knelt to meet her gaze. "That is our promise, to you and to every child. We will not forget you." And so the realm changed quietly, by voice and oath and promise kept. As autumn's gold gave way to the silver of frost, Jon looked over the lands from atop a hill above Highgarden. The sun shone on fields ready for harvest. Arianne stood beside him, Arya at his left, ghost seated, tail thumping. "What now?" Arya asked, watching the wind bend the barley. "We wait," Jon said softly, "and we watch. The old world may not let us keep what we've built." Arianne's smile was sly and steady. "Then let the old world come. We will teach it to hope." A raven wheeled overhead, a silent shadow against the light. In the distance, the bells of Highgarden rang, calling the people to market and song. Jon Snow felt the weight of all that had come before, and the gentle, aching hope of all that might yet be. He drew Arianne close, Arya grinned at the sky, and the wolf howled. A song for the new dawn. The pact, battered and imperfect, endured. And beneath its banner, for the first time in living memory, Westeros breathed free. A.K. Frost dusted the fields west of Highgarden, painting every last rose and thistle in glimmering white. The great harvest was gathered in, and the scent of new-milled flour drifted from the windmills across the river, mixing with the smoke from 100 hearths. Autumn had come in earnest, and with it, the reality of what Jon and the Pact had built. Something at once more fragile and more enduring than any castle, any line of kings. The realm stirred not just with rumors, but with hope and uncertainty, and every morning's light revealed new work, new challenge, new life. In those weeks, the city never truly slept. By day, the square beneath Highgarden's towers thronged with farmers selling apples, salt fish, and strings of red peppers. Women who'd once hidden children in cellars now brought them out into the sun to watch a motley company of Dornish and Reachman trained side by side. Night brought singing and stories. Soldiers gathered around fires to swap tales, Reach and Stormland voices mingling with the lilt of Dorne, the clipped vowels of the North. The banners above the gate, wolf and sun and flower, had faded a little in the rain, but their meaning was only brighter for it. Jon moved through this new world half restored, half haunted. Every face he passed, every hand he clasped, seemed to carry its own burden of memory. A field burned, a brother lost, a child gone hungry. Yet more and more he saw eyes that met his own, not with supplication or resentment, but with a quiet, cautious faith. The pact held, and for all the cracks and aches, life was slowly returning. The business of leadership was unceasing. Every morning, Jon met with Willis Tyrell, Arianne, Gendry, and a half-dozen lords and councillors in the Old Solar. Some days they planned for next year's plantings, debated trade with Old Town or Bravos, set new measures for water rights and market tolls. Other mornings, the talk was only of war, raids from the west, letters from the king, whispers of gold crossing the sea. Sir Kevan Lannister had withdrawn his banners from the Reach, licking wounds and building alliances with the Iron Bank, but the Golden Tooth bristled with fresh minted men and new siege engines. King Aegon had not been seen outside King's Landing in weeks, but his council was rumored to be full of hard-eyed strangers and red priests from Volantis. Across the narrow sea, talk grew of ships being built and sellswards trained, of a Dragon Queen's banner seen in Lys or Volantis or somewhere farther east. For now the realm lived in a season of wary peace. One afternoon, a chill wind swept through the market as Jon, Arianne, and Arya walked together. Arya wore the simple black leathers of a traveler, her hair cropped close, her eyes missing nothing. Arianne dressed in green and gold, colors of the Reach, but her bearing pure Dorne, her laugh as quick as her dagger. They moved quietly among the people, listening as merchants gossiped and soldiers debated which counselor was the most stubborn. Jon felt oddly at ease. He was known here, respected, if not beloved, and there was no need for the old Stark reserve. Here he could answer questions, solve disputes, kneel to speak with children, and leave each encounter a little lighter for it. They found themselves at a baker's stall, the air full of cinnamon and roasted apple. The baker's wife handed Arya a sweet bun, then nodded to Jon. For the Lord who kept his word. My sister's children eat because of your counsel. If you ever need bread, my ovens are yours. Jon accepted the gift with a grateful nod, and Arya grinned, her face suddenly all youth and old mischief. Careful, brother, or you'll grow as fat as King Robert. They laughed, and Arianne brushed crumbs from Arya's tunic. If we have peace, we may all grow fat. As they turned to leave, a ragged boy ran up, hair wild, eyes huge. He clutched a letter, sealed with a splash of blue wax. From White Harbor, m'lord. He gazed at Arya with awe. They say your wolf runs with the wild pack by the river. Arya tousled his hair. If you see her, give her my love. And a sausage, if you've got one. Jon opened the letter, brow furrowing. The Manderlys send news. Lord Wyman has received envoys from the Iron Islands. They offer peace if we'll recognize their claim to the Isles and Saltcliffe. Wyman says he'll not yield unless the council agrees, but he wishes guidance. Arianne's eyes narrowed. Ironborn peace is as slippery as an eel. They'll raid the coast again as soon as they smell weakness. Lantry Hontan. Arya shrugged. Let them hold Saltcliffe so long as they keep their axes to themselves. The people there are ironborn to the bone anyway. Jon considered. If it buys time, perhaps it is worth the risk. The realm can't bleed forever. I'll bring it to council. They made their way back through the square, Arya snacking on the last of the bun, Arianne greeting a gaggle of Dornish children who pressed wildflowers into her hands. That evening, the council gathered in the great hall. Willis Tyrell presided, his dogs dozing at his feet. Edmure Tully sat at his right, hands still rough from months of rebuilding the Riverlands. Gendry listened intently, learning the ways of lords with every passing day, while Moran Martell looked on with that quiet watchfulness Jon had come to respect. Jon laid out the Manderly letter, summarizing its terms. The Ironborn wish to keep Saltcliffe and the Isles. In exchange, they'll harry the king's men if he sends ships against us. They ask only to be left alone to their ways. Edmure frowned. Their ways are reaving and burning. Willis shook his head. And yet, every war we fight on the coast is a war we do not fight here. The North can hold them, better them as allies than enemies for now. Gendry was blunt. Let them have their rocks. So long as our people are safe, I don't care what banner they fly. Arianne nodded. If they break the pact, they break it for all. They know what that will bring. The council voted, and the message was clear. Peace with caution. Jon sent reply to White Harbor, careful to couch every promise in the language of oaths and duty. As the weeks passed, letters from Sansa brought further news of the North. The first snows have come, she wrote. The children here play at war, building little keeps from snow and naming themselves for the new council. They laugh more than I remember from my childhood, and I think that is your doing as much as mine. Arya's name is legend now. If you are wise, do not let her hear it, or she'll grow insufferable. Jon smiled as he read, warmth stirring in his chest. If only our children had been allowed such laughter, he said to Arianne that night. She pressed his hand. We build the future for them, Jon. If peace is to last, it must belong to the children. The council's work continued, sometimes joyous, sometimes grinding. The Pact of Highgarden became a living thing, adapting as the realm's wounds were revealed. New rules for fair harvest, a league for the protection of orphans, trading pacts with the free cities. Every matter brought dispute, debate, even bitter words, but the process itself grew familiar, even beloved. Then, as Winter's Edge crept south, a new threat loomed. Word arrived that Lord Connington's riders had broken the Pact's lines in the Dornish marches, burning villages and seizing grain. Meryn Martell returned from Sunspear with grim tidings. Aegon's banners had been seen at the head of a new host, this one filled with mercenaries and the sons of exiled lords. Jon called his commanders together. The king means to break us before winter. We must hold the passes and the grain roads, or all our gains are lost. Arya grinned, that old wolfish spark in her eyes. Let me lead the skirmishers, Jon. I know the woods, and the men listen when I speak. Yamatrimhau. Willis Tyrell set Jawdato. I'll send every knight who can ride. Highgarden's fields must not burn again. Arianne's voice was soft but steady. Dorne will not stand idle. Our spears are yours. Plans were drawn, messengers dispatched, and within days, the Pact's armies gathered at the borders. The marches filled with knights and archers, Dornish lancers, slipping through the brush, northern trackers moving like wraiths across the moors. Jon himself led the vanguard. Ghost ranged ahead, white shape darting among the shadows, bringing back word of enemy movement. At his side rode Arya, and not far behind, Gendry and a company of Stormlanders. The realm's fate hung once again on a knife's edge. The first battle was fought at Blackbriar Wood, the air thick with the cries of crows and the shudder of arrows. Jon's men held, Arya leading a daring charge through the trees, scattering mercenaries who'd never known the forest's darkness. Connington's host withdrew, licking wounds, but did not break. The second clash came at Duskhill, where Wylla's knights met the enemy head-on in a roaring charge. The Reach banners held the ridge, the Pact's men fighting not for gold, but for the land itself. By sunset, the king's men lay scattered, their banners trampled, and the grain stores untouched. In the days that followed, small victories built into momentum. Meryn's riders swept the border, driving off the last of the mercenaries. The people of the marches rose behind the Pact, pelting the king's men with rocks and scythes, refusing to yield food or shelter. As winter closed in, the king's armies fell back. Jon called his council at Ashford, where the first snows had whitened the rooftops, and there, in the stone hall hung with wolf and sun and flower, the Pact's leaders gathered in triumph. But there was no celebration, only the sober knowledge that peace must be tended as fiercely as war. Jon rose before them, cloak dusted with snow, Ghost silent at his side. We have won this season, but the king remains in King's Landing. His gold, his pride, his sorcery, these things do not fade with the winter. We must not grow soft. We must be the shield for all the realm, high and low alike. No. Willis nodded. Let the harvest be our victory. Feed the people. Shelter the homeless. Heal the wounded. Our strength is not in conquest, but in the peace we keep. Arianne's voice was fierce. Let word go out to every city, every holdfast. The Pact endures. The realm stands. The council dispersed to their lands. The army stood down to winter garrisons. And the people of the Reach, Dorne the North, and the Riverlands feasted and sang as they had not in years. Jon returned to Highgarden with Arianne, Arya, and Ghost, the roads white and silent behind them. As they entered the city, bells rang, and children followed their horses, laughing, their voices bright in the cold. That night, Jon walked the frost-hushed gardens alone, breath clouding in the dark, memories swirling. He thought of Ned Stark and Lyanna, of the Wall and Winterfell, of Daenerys and the fate she never found. The Pact was not a crown, not a throne, But it was something truer. An answer to the pain and promise that had shaped him. Ariane joined him, wrapped in furs. "Winter's breath is cold, but the fire burns within," she said, quoting an old Dornish saying. "You have made peace, Jon Snow. Let it last." He took her hand, warmth flooding his palm. "Let's walk. The future awaits, and I'd rather meet it with you." So they walked, together, beneath the starlit boughs, past the fields and rivers that now carried the hopes of half a realm. The wolf and the sun, at peace beneath the moon. While the world waited, watchful, uncertain, but for the first time in memory, full of hope.